A beautiful two-story house made of red brick stood out against the gray night sky. The sky was gray because it had recently snowed. The snow had delicately settled on the branches of trees in the yard, reaching up to the fence. This fence seemed more for demarcation than for security. A trained person could easily leap over it in one motion, as the man in black had been doing for over an hour, leaning against the trunk of a tall spruce. Many more trees and bushes grew in front of the man, making him practically invisible from the house. Yet, he could see everything perfectly. The windows on the ground floor were brightly lit and uncurtained. Through these windows, like a television screen, one could observe the life of a young family. If this were a movie, it would be about a wealthy, happy life, much like a commercial. In the middle of the vast living room stood a Christmas tree adorned with colorful baubles and garlands. Beside it, a man in his 30s tossed his young son into the air. The boy closed his eyes and flew into his father's arms. And when Dad caught him, the boy glanced at his smiling mother standing nearby. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at her beloved man. What an idyllic scene, thought the man behind the trees. In the time he stood there, he had managed to smoke a few cigarettes, carefully covering the ember with his palm, and all the butts now lay in his pocket. The man was cautious. His face, with merciless gray eyes, was partially obscured by a hood, and a broad, healed scar on his chin served as a reminder that he hadn't always been a professional. Caution never hurts. It had prompted him to bring a balaclava, now resting in the jacket pocket, but he deemed it unnecessary. No one would recognize him. Observing the typical evening of this family, the man pondered how the young father at the window bore no resemblance whatsoever to the tough and decisive Victor Rust, whose uncompromising nature had sealed his fate. Now he was just an ordinary family man, playing with his son and getting ready for Christmas. But Noel saw him differently and knew about Victor's steely character. Noel began to slowly move from tree to tree, trying to quietly make his way around the corner of the house. There, in one of the uninhabited rooms, a window was left unlocked. Noel had opened it himself the day before when he accompanied his boss to this house. He had waited a long time and was convinced that apart from the young family, there was definitely no one else in the house. However, a couple of minutes later, a woman in her 40s descended the stairs wearing a neat gray dress. She was the Rust family's housekeeper, Eleanor. Usually, she finished her duties by 6 in the evening. But today she had decided to stay and spend the night at the host's house to start Christmas preparations early in the morning. She descended and, tilting her head to the side, smiled as she watched the parents playing with the boy. She enjoyed working for this family. "Isn't it time for Tyler to go to bed?" the woman said. "I don't want to sleep." The boy began to protest, but his mother sided with the housekeeper. "Yes, Eleanor, please escort our little rascal to his bedroom, and I'll come up in 5 minutes. Go on, Tyler. You need to get some rest." Eleanor took the hand of the disgruntled 2-year-old Tyler and led him upstairs. Meanwhile, his mother decided to talk to her husband. "Victor, have you made up with Robert? Will they come to us for Christmas?" "Everything's fine now. They'll definitely come." Victor embraced his wife. "Robert accepted my decision. After all, it's my business. And Robert doesn't even own a third of it. You know, I've known Robert for 1,000 years, but he's always drawn to something illegal. I'm tired of trying to convince him that profit isn't everything. Honesty is important in our line of work. Would we agree to import those uncertified drugs from abroad now? And what? People would get poisoned. No, shady dealings are not for me. I'm really glad Robert finally understood that." "I'm glad too." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Christmas without Robert's family feels like it's not Christmas." The woman raised her head and looked into her husband's face. She saw his eyebrows shoot up in surprise and followed his gaze. From the darkness of the side corridor, a dark, menacing silhouette approached with smooth steps. He crossed the threshold of the living room, and the part of his face not covered by the hood was illuminated. Victor instantly recognized him by the scar on his chin. "Noel, what are you doing here?" Victor asked, surprised. "You should have given in to Robert," Noel replied. With that, Noel's hand, holding a black silenced pistol, rose from the pocket of his black jacket. Victor fell first. A neat, straight hole appeared on his forehead. His eyes remained wide open. Victor's wife didn't try to run. The first thing she thought about was her little son on the second floor, and she instinctively looked upstairs. She saw Tyler's face. The boy stood on the landing of the second floor, peering through the gaps in the staircase railing at his fallen father. The woman managed to shout, "Run, Tyler, run," and then collapsed next to her husband. Noel lowered his hand with the weapon and sighed discontentedly. The most unpleasant part was ahead. The child. Noel had known this child since infancy, and it would have been much better if Tyler had been asleep now. But he was on the second floor and saw everything. Not only Tyler saw it, but also the housekeeper, Eleanor. When her mistress fell to the floor, Eleanor grabbed the child and dashed into the second floor corridor. She rushed into the guest bedroom. Suddenly, the child whimpered. He whimpered like a small animal that had lost its parents. Despite his young age, he understood everything. That Mom and Dad wouldn't get up again. And that the gun in Uncle Noel's hand wasn't one of those toy pistols that filled the box in his room. Eleanor firmly covered the boy's mouth with her palm. Tyler shook his head, trying to break free. But the woman squeezed his mouth tighter and tighter. She didn't hear footsteps on the stairs. Noel knew how to work silently, but she heard his voice in the corridor. "Tyler, Tyler, where are you? Don't be afraid. Come out. Your parents and I decided to play a game. It's just a game." The housekeeper immediately realized that this person wouldn't leave without finding the child. What to do? On tiptoe, trying not to make any noise, Eleanor approached the dark window. Yes, the second floor. But that's their only chance to escape. The woman pushed open the casement, and the frosty air hit her face. She peeked out. It seemed like luck was on their side. Right under the window was a large snowdrift. There was no time to think or hesitate. Still holding 2-year-old Tyler in her arms, the woman climbed onto the windowsill and jumped down. The cold took her breath away, and Tyler fell silent in her arms, as if he had turned to stone, his gaze frozen. Eleanor realized he was in shock. As quickly as she could, the woman extricated herself from the snowdrift. Eleanor ran. She ran as fast as she possibly could. She dashed out of the gate and raced along the brightly lit street of the cottage community. This community was gated, and at the entrance sat an elderly man who operated the barrier. Eleanor managed to reach him just as Noel was checking the last room in the house. The boy was nowhere to be found. Noel grew angry. Entering the guest bedroom, he was about to start turning everything upside down. It was cold in the guest bedroom. The frosty air blew in through the wide open window. The man rushed to the window and saw tracks in the snow. Had the boy jumped out, he wouldn't have dared. Besides, the indentations in the snowdrift were too big for a child. Clearly, it was an adult who had jumped. Fear spread through Noel's veins. Someone else was here. Another adult who had seen everything that had happened here. With frustration, Noel threw back his hood. How could this have happened? He had watched Victor's family through the window for so long, and there was no one else in the house. It was absolutely certain that the housekeeper left them at 6. There was no time for Noel to dwell on this. He needed to create an alibi and find the boy. Deeply pulling down his black hood over his eyes, the man strode along the street of the cottage community. He found his car a couple of blocks away, parked by the trash bins. Getting in, he began to pound his fists on the steering wheel in rage. He hadn't done the job. Worse, he had botched it. How would Robert take this? But he couldn't go to Robert right away. Having calmed down a bit, Noel started the car and drove to the lake beyond the community. There, he walked to the ice hole and sank the rubber pads from his shoes and gloves into it. He was supposed to throw his weapon there too, but he didn't do it. The job wasn't finished yet. It was long overdue to go to Robert. Noel imagined the tension his boss must be feeling. The man returned to his car and drove back to the cottage community. He drove almost to the same place from where he had recently hurriedly left. Just a block away from Victor's house was Robert's house. Friends purposely settled close to each other. Robert's house was more substantial, 3 stories high, and it was very lively inside now. Several expensive cars were parked near the gate. Noel knew who they belonged to. That SUV belonged to the local police chief, and that car belonged to the mayor. Noel was aware of why Robert had gathered such an influential company around him this evening. The mansion gates were not locked. The man slipped to the back door of the house, unlocked it with his key, and, sneaking into the guard's room, pretended to sleep. When Robert burst into his room together with the local police chief, Noel sat up and blinked sleepily, asking what time it was. That was the plan. Robert was carefully pretending to be very drunk, but his eyes were impatiently questioning the guard. Noel looked away, imagining Robert's fury. And he wasn't wrong. Half an hour later, after seeing off all his guests, Robert stormed into Noel's room. "So, is it done?" he demanded. "Not entirely. Victor and his wife are no more. But someone else was in the house. And that someone escaped with the child," Noel said. "What? What are you talking about? Are you telling me that this someone saw you and therefore ran away, taking Tyler with them?" "It seems so." Noel stared at the floor. Robert wiped his sweaty forehead and sank heavily into the nearby armchair. With trembling hands, he pulled a cigarette from his pocket and lit it right in the room. "Noel, you understand why all this was planned, don't you? After Victor and his family's demise, I was supposed to become the sole manager of our company. Do you hear me? The only one. But, it turns out, Tyler survived. He's Victor's heir. He inherits Victor's controlling stake in the company, and until he comes of age, his guardian can do as they please with it. So, Victor's death didn't give us anything if his son is alive. But what's even scarier is if someone really saw you. Everything was planned so beautifully. I have 100% alibi. I was drinking with such people, telling them about our long-standing friendship with Victor. You know, everyone respected him in this town, and I always paled in comparison. You had an alibi too. You were peacefully sleeping here all this time. Even the police chief confirmed it. And now this mess. Noel, do you even realize what you've done? Find the person who was in the house. Find them today. Both them and the child. Any thoughts on who it could be? I thought maybe you would know. Maybe Victor mentioned that someone was supposed to come to him. No one could have come to him. He and his wife have no one. And no close friends besides me either. You know all this yourself. Except for Eleanor, their housekeeper. She usually doesn't stay overnight. But, exactly. It could only be her. Who else would need to save the child? If it was a stranger, they would have just fled in terror, forgetting about Tyler. Noel, get up. Let's go to this Eleanor. I know where she lives. Tell me the address, Robert. I'll go myself. Noel said. No way. I won't trust you alone with this anymore. Let's go together in your car. I already have an alibi. So, let's go clean up the mess you made. In the residential area of the city, it was quiet. Noel went up to the 3rd floor alone. Robert stayed in the car. The man barely touched the doorbell when the apartment door suddenly swung open. A bewildered man, who didn't look sleepy at all, looked at Noel. It was Eleanor's husband. He was very nervous. He immediately told Noel how his wife burst into the apartment a couple of hours ago, half-dressed. But most importantly, she had Victor's child with her. Eleanor didn't explain anything to her husband. Being on the verge of hysteria, she got dressed, took money, a big bag, wrapped up Tyler, and ran away. What happened there? Eleanor's husband asked Noel. Why did my wife take Tyler? "Are you from Victor? Is he looking for him?" Noel smirked dryly, feeling for the handle of the gun in his pocket. Too many casualties. This shouldn't have happened. But this man knows too much. Carefully carrying a large bag in her hands, Eleanor stepped into the train carriage, entered the compartment, firmly slid the door shut behind her, and unzipped the bag. There, wrapped in her old fur coat and curled up, lay Tyler, his large brown eyes, suddenly devoid of all childlike innocence, still stared blankly ahead. He was like a doll, not uttering a word since their jump into the snowdrift. Eleanor knew what she was doing. Already running out of Victor's house gate, she realized that this town wasn't safe for the boy. Noel was Robert's loyal lapdog, and his cruelty resembled that of his boss. While Robert could hide his rotten nature behind charm, Noel was always stern and made no effort to conceal his cruelty. Eleanor sincerely couldn't understand what could bind such an honest and open man like Victor with Robert. However, these two men had been friends for a very long time, since they grew up in the orphanage together. Because of their long friendship, Victor couldn't see through his friend's true nature. He was the one who rose first, organizing a pharmaceutical company, and later brought Robert into it. Mostly, everything belonged to Victor, and lately Robert was becoming increasingly dissatisfied with this arrangement, especially in decision-making. While at Victor's house, Eleanor heard the friends arguing. Robert wanted to push through a deal with a foreign company involving uncertified medications. Victor was vehemently against it, even though the deal could bring in huge profits. Eleanor heard Victor's anger. "Robert, it's not just about money. Even if these medicines turn out to be ineffective, they'll ruin thousands of lives. People will pin their hopes on recovery, but the drugs won't help. And that's in the best-case scenario. What if these drugs turn out to be harmful? What then, Robert? How will you sleep at night if we let these drugs into our country? Anyway, I consider our conversation over. I make the decisions in our company." Then, very suddenly, Robert relented, and the friendship between the two partners became cloudless again. As Eleanor now understood, Robert was just pretending, planning something terrible. He decided to get rid of Victor and make decisions unilaterally. But even Eleanor, just a housekeeper, understood that for this to happen, there shouldn't be anyone left from Victor's family, not even little Tyler. Eleanor didn't care about money, deals, or companies. She couldn't give up the boy. Eleanor wanted to hide Tyler so that he wouldn't be found. But here, in Town, a small town, it was impossible. Chicago wasn't far away. There, Tyler would easily disappear. Eleanor couldn't keep him with her. She had a husband, and she would have to return to him. Let Tyler live somewhere in an orphanage. The main thing was that he would live. The train reached Chicago in a couple of hours. Eleanor, again hiding the child in the bag, stepped onto the platform. Her first task was to find something for Tyler to wear. Wrapped in her shapeless coat, the boy was still in a nice pajama with the logo of an expensive brand on the chest. They needed to get rid of that pajama. Eleanor discreetly slipped into a thrift store. She quickly grabbed items from the shelves, entered the fitting room with the bag, and emerged lightly, leading the 2-year-old boy in an old, long coat. The store staff were very surprised to find a large bag, a faux fur coat, and a very expensive children's pajama in the fitting room later. Eleanor walked through Chicago, holding Tyler's hand. The boy remained silent and unresponsive. All attempts to feed him had failed. Tyler was already in shock, and she had to do something terrible. She couldn't bring herself to do it. All day, she wandered around the city with the child, trying to feed and comfort him, but time was passing. In Town, they probably found Victor and his wife's bodies already. Her prolonged absence could raise suspicions. She needed to return home to her husband and tell him that she spent the night of December 24th at home and didn't go anywhere. The street was starting to darken, and Chicago was getting ready for Christmas. Christmas trees brightly lit up everywhere, Garlands sparkled, and decorated shop windows gleamed. People became happier and more hurried, rushing to their homes, to their loved ones. Eleanor looked at Tyler, and her heart ached. Just yesterday, the boy was happily laughing in his father's arms, next to a tall Christmas tree. And now the child's face was frozen, his eyes expressing nothing. Eleanor cried as she sat Tyler down on a snowdrift in some park and slipped a note into his small hand. Spencer hurried up the metro stairs. Leah would be displeased again. It was December 25th, and he went to work and got delayed. Spencer worked in the police force, and not long ago, he had been demoted for refusing to cover up for some rich guy. Now he dealt with juvenile offenders. Spencer didn't like this job at all. Despite his stern appearance and his reputation as a tough cop, Spencer took the fate of these misguided teenagers to heart. On December 25th, Spencer dragged out his ward, once again caught with drugs. And to make matters worse, his car wouldn't start in the cold when he was already free and rushing home to his pregnant wife. He ran to the metro, and when he reached his station, he decided to take a shortcut through the park to get home. The park was already lit up with lanterns, and there were hardly any people around. Spencer imagined how angry his wife must be right now and quickened his pace. He glanced briefly at the small snow hills along the cleared, wide park path, and blinked several times, not believing what he saw. Was that a little child sitting there, right in the snow, under a tree? It was. Spencer hurried over. The boy was about 2 years old. That meant he should already be talking. Hey. Spencer crouched down in front of the child. Whose kid are you? How did you get here? Where's your mom? The child remained silent, staring off into space. Spencer noticed a crumpled piece of paper in the tiny, frozen hand of the boy. He read the note, written in a very uneven handwriting, apparently in a state of great distress. His name is Tyler. I don't need him. I can't take care of him. Everything fell into place. This kid was almost his case. The drinking, most likely. Mother got tired of taking care of the child, and she got rid of him like this, leaving him in the park in the snow. All of Tyler's clothing screamed of desperate need. An old coat, worn-out boots, and that look. He must have seen a lot for such a young age. Carefully, so as not to scare the child, Spencer reached out and lifted him out of the snowdrift. Spencer ran quickly along the park path, unaware that behind him, a woman stepped out of the shadows of the bushes. And, wistfully watching the man's back, she prayed for them. In the taxi, Spencer dialed his wife. Leah, something's come up. Don't tell me you're running late again. Leah interrupted. I've been all dressed up and waiting for hours. The Peters are expecting us. Leah, I found a child in the park. I don't care about your Neds. Something's always happening with them. It's Christmas today. Spencer, can't you detach yourself from work sometimes? Leah, you don't understand. I found a little child. He was sitting in a snowdrift. Should I have just walked past? I don't want to know anymore. Leah exhaled suddenly in a calm tone. You know what? I'm not spending Christmas alone. I'm calling a taxi right now and going to the Peters. Okay, Leah, go, Spencer replied. I'll join you soon. Make sure you do. I'm tired of going everywhere alone. I'm pregnant, Spencer. We're having a baby. You need to stop stressing me out. The officer on duty at the police station chuckled when he saw Spencer return with the child in his arms. Are you moonlighting as a nanny now? Where did you find him? I don't see anything funny here. The kid's mother abandoned him. There was a note with him. Let's get him registered, and I'll take him to the hospital. He needs to be checked out. The staff at the nearest hospital's pediatric ward greeted Spencer and the child with great displeasure. It's Christmas today. The nurse shrugged. There's hardly any staff. Most of the patients, except for the very sick ones, have been sent home. What am I supposed to do with your kid now? Well, let's assign him to a room. Let him lie there until tomorrow. And what about tomorrow? Will he be examined or not? The boy was sitting in a snowdrift. He needs to be examined now. Go up to the 5th floor. There's an on-duty doctor there. The young doctor, under Spencer's insistent gaze, took the examination of the boy very seriously. He listened carefully to his breathing, checked his mouth. Well, externally, the child seems healthy. I don't hear any lung noises. However, you can see that there's something wrong with him. He's somewhat subdued, always silent. Most likely, the boy is developmentally delayed. Has it not occurred to you, Spencer sharply interrupted the doctor, that he might just be in shock? His own mother abandoned him in the park, in the snow. It seems the child is no stranger to living in an unfortunate environment. Although, you can always tell right away when a child is from a troubled background, and this one doesn't seem like it. Either way, we can only conduct a full examination after the holidays. For now, let him stay in the pediatric department. He's a child, and he's been through a tragedy. He's in shock, and you want to leave him alone in the room for the holidays. And what do you suggest? What, in your opinion, can I do? The doctor said, I'll take him home with me. Spencer suddenly decided. He approached the couch where Tyler was sitting and started putting a jacket on him. What do you mean? Take him home? The doctor was bewildered. The paperwork for the child has already been filled out. This seems, well, illegal. And is it legal to leave him alone in an empty room? I'm taking the child under my responsibility. I'll leave my phone number at the pediatric department. When there's an opportunity for a full examination, I'll bring him in. Spencer's spacious 3-bedroom apartment greeted him with darkness and silence. Leah was already gone. It seems he had deceived her again. He wouldn't be able to go to Peter's place now. First, Spencer warmed up some food and tried to feed the boy. He kept talking to Tyler, noticing that he understood, even though the child hadn't uttered a sound since he found him in the snow, and the eyes remained just as frozen and lifeless. However, Tyler ate, and then, when Spencer filled the bathtub with warm water, he obediently went to bathe. Afterward, Spencer wrapped Tyler in a large bath towel and carried him to the window. Snow was falling outside. Look, Tyler, how beautiful. Merry Christmas to you. In the dimly lit room, as Spencer stood by the window with the child in his arms, he felt the boy's body suddenly tremble. He looked at Tyler's face. It contorted, and big tears rolled down his chubby cheeks. Tyler's eyes came alive. The boy burst into uncontrollable sobs. Leah returned from her guests around midnight, furious, and immediately pounced on her husband. Why aren't you answering your phone? I called you 100 times. I put it on silent so as not to wake our little guest, Spencer said cautiously. She first froze with her mouth open, then darted into the room, freezing over the couch where Tyler was sleeping. What is this, Spencer? Whose child is this? The woman hissed. Spencer gently took his wife's hand, led her out of the room, and closed the door behind him. Leah, I told you I found this child in the park. He had a note in his hand. His mother abandoned him. What's that got to do with you? What were you supposed to do? Take him to the station, and then come to Peter's. Why did you bring him here? Leah, you see, I took him to the hospital, and they wanted to leave him there all alone. Oh God, when will this all end? The woman grabbed her head. We're going to have a baby soon, and I hardly see you. You're always disappearing with these troubled teenagers of yours. And me? Why should I spend Christmas alone? Everyone else is with their families, and I have a husband. Or do I? Yes, you have a husband. Spencer pulled his wife close to him. Leah, calm down. I'm sorry it turned out this way again. Let's go to bed. Already in bed, having calmed down, he listened to what was happening in the next room, wondering if Tyler had woken up. Leah noticed this. Listen, what's going to happen with this boy? She asked. I hope you'll take him where he needs to go tomorrow. I don't know how to deal with children his age. Leah, you see, there's hardly anyone at the hospital right now, and it will be the same throughout the holidays. Tyler will have no one there, and he's already stressed. You should have seen how he cried. And I think I understand why. Most likely, he was expecting to spend Christmas with his mom. And now he's in shock from her betrayal. What betrayal? What shock? What are you talking about? This boy is still too young to understand anything. How old is he? Approximately, the doctor said probably around 2 years old. I feel like he understands everything. Leah, please, let Tyler stay with us until the hospital staff returns. He won't be a bother to you, really. I'll take care of him myself. And tomorrow, the three of us will go to the mall and buy you those boots you've been wanting. Agree. Leah, the holidays were coming to an end. Leah had no trouble with Tyler. Spencer had the weekend off, and he took care of the boy himself. The child became a bit livelier and was no longer like a doll with a frozen gaze. He ate, watched TV, but still remained silent. Leah speculated that the boy might be mute from birth. Spencer disagreed. I don't think so. If the boy were mute, he'd try to communicate with gestures, and he doesn't do that. Besides, Tyler is quite socialized. It's hard to believe he's from a troubled family. Yeah, he doesn't seem like it, Leah said. Now that Spencer had bought him new clothes, Tyler looked like a normal child. Very cute, with big brown eyes, thick, unusually straight eyebrows, and pronounced cheekbones. Tyler looked at Leah very seriously. She had never seen the boy smile, and the darkness in those expressive eyes seemed to conceal some terrible tragedy. But what scared her even more was that her husband didn't leave the boy's side for a moment. Leah was afraid of something, and her fears were confirmed. Leah, let's adopt Tyler. This statement caught Leah off guard. No, absolutely not. In 6 months, we'll have our own baby. Why do we need this other child? Besides, you're always around now. But when the weekend ends, you'll be gone all day again with your cursed job. Leah, please, I won't be able to give him away. I just can't. Sometimes I feel like all of this wasn't accidental. It wasn't by chance my car broke down that evening, and I walked through that park. It wasn't by chance there was hardly anyone at the hospital, and I couldn't leave him there. Tyler seems to have been sent to us by fate, and he should live with us. Well, I don't owe anyone anything, Leah said. Soon I'll have a bunch of worries with a newborn. And this one is little too. He needs a lot of attention. Besides, he's mute. Tyler isn't mute, Spencer replied. You'll see. He'll start talking. Leah, do you want a fur coat? Remember the one you were eyeing when we were buying you boots? But you said we couldn't afford it, and that we need to save up for a new car, Leah said. The auto shop said our current one will do for a while longer. We can drive it for a couple more years. Leah, let's buy you that fur coat. Leah, already envisioning herself in the new coat, laughed. Spencer, do you even realize how silly and unequal this exchange is? A fur coat, just for winter. But a child, he's for life. He requires investments, attention, time, and love, Spencer said. Tyler needs love, and you and I can give it to him. Imagine how hard it would be for him in an orphanage. He'll never speak there for sure, but he won't speak either. He's like some kind of lifeless thing, sitting there all day, staring at the TV. No emotions. It's okay. The weekend is ending. I'll fully examine Tyler, and maybe we'll find out the reason for his silence. After the trip to the hospital, Spencer brought Tyler home again. Leah was angry. Why didn't you leave him there? Who even allowed you to take him? It's illegal for him to still be living with us. It will be legal. Leah, I've already arranged it, and the adoption process will go very quickly. Remember where I work. I have the right connections. And did you ask me if I agree? I didn't give my consent. What did the doctors say about him? Just as I expected. The boy is completely healthy. The psychiatrist said his silence is most likely the result of some trauma and, over time, in a calm environment, he'll start talking again. And can you imagine what the atmosphere is like in an orphanage? Leah, please. You see, Tyler doesn't cause any trouble. Will you agree? And we'll go buy you that coat today. Leah pondered. She did want the fur coat. And indeed, the boy didn't cause any trouble. And on one hand, this child could become a leverage point with her husband. She could force him to stay home more often, citing the difficulty of managing the child while pregnant. The woman agreed, and Tyler stayed. A month later, he was already quite an active boy, running around the apartment. But he still didn't speak. Spencer tried not to miss work, while Leah constantly dragged her husband out of the house. She enjoyed walking hand in hand with her handsome husband in her new fur coat. She even liked it when Spencer held Tyler's hand. The boy was quite handsome, and together they looked splendid. A classy and happy family. Leah caught envious glances from single women and simply reveled in them. On Sunday, she dragged Spencer to the mall, wanting to look at cribs for the future baby. She walked along the rows of the most expensive cribs, cooing with delight. Meanwhile, Spencer constantly caught Tyler's gaze, directed towards the toy department. Of course, he's a child. He needs toys, Spencer thought. Leah still couldn't decide, and Spencer, promising to come back here with her again soon, led his family to where Tyler was drawn. The boy's eyes lit up when Spencer asked the saleswoman to pack the biggest and most beautiful remote-controlled robot. But that wasn't enough. They walked further among the shelves of various toys, both the boy and the man's eyes sparkling. Leah, lips pursed in displeasure, waited for them near the checkout. Look, Tyler, just like a real one. Do you want one? Spencer took a shiny black pistol from the display and playfully aimed it at the child, and then Tyler screamed, loudly, piercingly, attracting the attention of all the shoppers and store staff. Spencer dropped the pistol, crouched down in front of the boy. Mute horror froze in Tyler's eyes, and he continued to scream, screaming so loudly that it hurt the ears. Spencer pulled the child close, stroking his back. It's okay, Tyler. It's okay. We won't buy this bad toy, Daddy. Tyler wrapped his arms around Spencer's neck. Daddy, Daddy, Tyler repeated, crying, not understanding why he was crying. Spencer stood up, holding Tyler in his arms. He hurried through the store, asking his wife to pay for the robot. He ran to the exit of the mall, to his car in the parking lot. By the time he settled Tyler in the car, the boy had calmed down a bit. Spencer took out his phone and dialed the same psychiatrist who had examined the child. You have to urgently see Tyler. He spoke. But there's something. I can't. It's Sunday today, and I'm at home. Tell me your address. It's urgent, Spencer insisted. In the psychiatrist's huge apartment, his wife and adult daughter were present. They looked at the persistent man who appeared at their doorstep, with a child in his arms, with great displeasure. The psychiatrist himself was also displeased, but he took Tyler deeper into the apartment, leaving Spencer standing in the hallway. They were gone for quite a while. Then the doctor came out alone. Don't worry, your child is with my daughter now, and we need to talk privately, so he doesn't hear. The child experienced some trauma and completely forgot his past. He doesn't remember anything before he ended up in your apartment. His brain is blocking some memories. I talked to him for a long time. The boy seemed to be reborn the moment he saw the snow from the window. From that moment on, Tyler remembers everything. He considers you his father and your wife his mother. And as for speech, before the trauma, the child spoke quite well. That's why his speech is returned. Apparently, some event triggered it. What happened in that store? Nothing special. Spencer shrugged. Tyler got scared of the toy gun. He started screaming so loudly that it hurt the ears, and then unexpectedly called me Dad. Oh, I don't know. The psychiatrist shook his head. All of this suggests some not very good thoughts. Maybe the child witnessed something very bad, since he got so scared of the toy gun. But in the end, it's you, not me. who works in the police. So you figure it out. I understand. Thank you. From that day on, Tyler seemed like a perfectly ordinary boy, living with his dad and mom. But at first, Leah would slightly grimace when the child addressed her. He calls me mom, she would tell her husband. I saw him a month ago. I can't get used to this. What did you expect? We adopted him together. Treat him like our son. Not quite adopted. As far as I know, the paperwork isn't fully ready yet. Spencer, don't you want to take Tyler to that psychiatrist again? To work with him? To restore the boy's memory? Why bother? Frowned Spencer. The psychiatrist said his memory disappeared due to trauma. Some events happened. Terrible events that the child's brain blocked. Besides, his biological mother abandoned him. Why would he want to remember that? Tyler is happy now, and everything is fine with us. I'll dig around, see if there were any shootouts the day before Tyler appeared in the park. Maybe I'll find out something. Spencer asked around among the police, but there was nothing that could be connected to the child. Several months passed, and the time for childbirth approached. Leah started fussing. Spencer, we need to enroll Tyler in daycare. You're at work during the day, and I won't have time to deal with him. Isn't it too early? The man asked doubtfully. At what age do they accept children into daycare? There are special nursery groups. So, it's not too early for Tyler. All right, Spencer relented. But we need somewhere closer. There's a daycare in the neighboring yard. That's private, objected Leah. We'll have to pay for it. Then we'll pay. I'll find time to go there. Get all the details. Leah didn't like her husband's suggestion. The next morning, after seeing her husband off to work, she fed Tyler breakfast and invited him for a walk. In reality, she wanted to reach the regular daycare, which was much further away but free. Leah didn't like that Spencer was spending so much money on the foster child. Tyler seemed like a decent kid, but he wasn't theirs after all. Lost in thought about all this, the woman walked along the street with Tyler. The boy kept getting distracted. He wanted to go to the playground. Leah scolded him. Walk faster. We need to go somewhere for errands, she said sternly, leading the boy by the hand, crossing the street between 2 blocks of residential buildings. There weren't many cars here, and the pedestrian crossing was far away. Leah glanced at the road briefly and didn't notice the dark car approaching them at a fairly decent speed. The driver tried to brake, hoping the woman would jump back, but she didn't even look at the braking car. She was saying something to the boy she was leading by the hand. There was a collision, maybe not a very strong one, because the car was braking, but enough to throw both the woman and the child aside. Robert sat at the long table next to his faithful Noel. Dressed in smart suits, the men looked like very respectable businessmen. Robert was smiling, of course, because on the other side of the table, right in front of them with Noel, sat a representative of a foreign partner with an interpreter. They had already discussed all the conditions, and all that was left was to sign the documents, which Robert did with great satisfaction. The deal was done. The very deal Victor would never have gone for and which cost him his life. The men stood up, shook hands, and after a brief farewell nod, the representative of the foreign partner along with his interpreter left the office. Robert rubbed his hands together. It had happened. However, his joy couldn't be complete. He was still something like an acting manager in pharma tech, not the owner, and he wouldn't be until Victor's child was alive. Tyler was declared missing, considered abducted. Abducted by Eleanor, Victor's maid. The police concluded that she had gone crazy, shot her employers, and kidnapped their child. And then, returning home, she shot her own husband. Naturally, such a version arose with the help of Robert. Sobbing over the body of his murdered friend at the funeral, Robert swore that he would do everything in his power to find Eleanor and Tyler. And here Robert wasn't lying. He was tearing himself apart searching for Eleanor. Noel almost immediately learned that Eleanor had bought a ticket for a sleeper car to Chicago. The child wasn't with her, but there was a large bag, and everything became clear. She had hidden Tyler and taken him to Chicago. But she was supposed to come back. Her husband was here her whole life, and she just disappeared. Noel spent 2 weeks watching Eleanor's house from his car. The woman never showed up. Noel couldn't have known that Eleanor was actually returning to Fosstown by bus. And the town was small, so the murder of Victor and his wife shook everyone. People were discussing it everywhere. At the bus station, in the waiting area, Eleanor twitched when she heard the familiar surname and stopped to listen to what 2 gossipers sitting on a bench were saying. Victor and his family are rich. No wonder, he owns Pharma Tech. Maybe their maid was jealous and shot them. But why did she steal the child and kill her husband? Startled, Eleanor screamed and covered her mouth tightly with her hand. Not understanding anything from fear, Eleanor left the bus station building. And right there, without moving from the door, she saw a young police officer pinning up a wanted poster on the bulletin board. A poster for her. Suspect wanted in connection with the murder of 3 people. 3. So, it was true. They killed her husband too. Eleanor knew who did it. And she knew that now no one would listen to her. Not realizing what she was doing but understanding only one thing. She needed to get out of this town immediately. Eleanor saw a bus about to leave the bus station. The doors were already closing when the woman jumped onto it. She didn't care where to go, just far away from here. Robert saw off his foreign partner. He rubbed his palms and glanced at his bodyguard. The smile vanished from the man's face. Noel, he began. Look, I signed the documents and made this long-awaited deal. Soon Pharma Tech will be making huge profits. Thanks to me. And yet, it doesn't belong to me. How is that possible? 2 months have passed, and you haven't found Eleanor or the child. Robert, she didn't return to the town and wasn't at her husband's funeral. You know I checked everything, even went to Chicago. It's obvious that Eleanor decided to keep the child and is hiding somewhere with him. And it's also clear that she won't be living under her own identity. So, Robert, how can I find a lonely woman with a little child in such a huge city? What are you trying to tell me? That we should stop searching? I told you, as long as Victor's child is considered kidnapped, I can't become the rightful owner of Pharma Tech. So, search however you want, but find me Eleanor with Tyler. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Tyler was indeed with a woman, but not the one Robert and Noel had presumed. The boy was with Leah, whom he considered his mom. She lay on the couch with a sad expression, resting her hand on her head, and Tyler cuddled up to her as best he could. Mom was sad, and despite his young age, the boy understood why. It was all because of what happened to them on the road. A dark car hit Tyler on the side, and he flew a couple of steps. He immediately got up and ran to his unconscious mom. At that time, Mom had a big belly, and then, when Tyler and Dad picked her up from the hospital, the belly was gone, and Mom became different, angry and irritable. She spent most of the time lying on the couch. Sometimes tears ran down her face, but she didn't let Tyler wipe them away with his warm little hands, as the boy wanted. She frowned and pushed the child away. Tyler wandered around the couch, played a little with his favorite robot. He wanted to turn on cartoons, but some movie was playing on the screen that Mom was watching, and Tyler didn't dare to take the remote. Amidst the noise of the TV, the child listened for other sounds. He was waiting for the front door to open, and he got his wish. Dad's here. With a joyful cry, the boy rushed into the hallway. Spencer leaned down, picked up Tyler, and gently tossed him up. Whenever Dad did that, the boy froze with joy, though he couldn't understand why. When he flew back into his father's arms, the man's face seemed to briefly change to another, equally beloved one. Not letting go of Tyler, Spencer peeked into the room. Leah made no attempt to get up from the couch. She just glanced lazily at her husband peering in. Hungry, Spencer went to the kitchen, sat Tyler on a chair, and cheerfully asked, "Tyler, what did you eat today? What did Mom give you for lunch?" "I didn't eat." The boy shook his head. Opening the lid, Spencer looked into the empty pot next to the stove, then into the fridge, his brows furrowed in annoyance. "Well, it looks like we're both very hungry. What do we have in the freezer?" "Frozen lasagna. Dad will heat it up now, and we'll eat together." 30 minutes later, Spencer watched Tyler eat, but he himself poked at his food without appetite. Deciding it couldn't go on like this, he pushed his plate aside and went into the room to his wife. Before starting the conversation, he made sure Tyler was still eating in the kitchen and wouldn't overhear what the adults were discussing. Spencer sat on the edge of the couch, put his hand on Leah's knee, gently squeezed it, and shook her, trying to rouse her from her thoughts. "Leah, I understand we've suffered a great loss. We lost our child. It feels like it's not we, just me." The woman replied, "You have a child. You just fed him in the kitchen. You treat him like your own. I feel like you're not upset. It's his fault for what happened." "Leah, stop." Spencer raised his voice. "Tyler is not to blame for anything. It was you who decided to walk to daycare that day. You weren't paying attention when crossing the road. I don't blame you. It was a tragic accident, and I do blame." The woman brushed her husband's hand off her knee. "I blame both you and your Tyler. If you hadn't brought him into our home, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't have left the house that day, and now we would be taking care of our child, our own child. You hear? I can't stop thinking about it, and sometimes it feels like everything that happened is a terrible dream. I'll wake up pregnant, or with a child in my arms." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes, and Spencer tried to hug her, but Leah pushed him away. "Don't touch me. Better get rid of Tyler. Send him to an orphanage. I can't stand to see him. He's like a reminder." "No, Leah, that's not going to happen. Tyler considers us his family. He's a good, affectionate boy, and I won't give him up to an orphanage. This child has already been betrayed once, and it traumatized him so much that he even lost his memory. Imagine what will happen to him if we abandon him now." "I don't care," Leah hissed. "He calls me Mom, and it turns my stomach. That's how my child should have called me. The one who will never be." "But why never, Leah? Doctor said you just need to improve your health, and in a year, you can get pregnant again. We'll have our own children. But the thing is, Tyler has become mine. I treat him as my own. He's such a good boy. Leah, you can learn to love him." "I can't," Leah said. "If before I was neutral towards him, now I feel like I hate him." "You can't treat him like this. I'm grieving too. I also lost a child, but Tyler has nothing to do with it. Right now, I asked him what he ate today. Turns out, you didn't even feed him. Leah, don't you dare. You lie around all day, drowning in your sorrow. Meanwhile, the boy goes hungry. I've arranged for him to go to daycare soon. We need to wait a couple more weeks. And you're obligated to pay attention to him and feed him." Leah shot her husband a venomous look, and from that look, he understood she wouldn't do anything he asked. Spencer sighed and returned to the kitchen to the child. How could anyone not love this little one? Leah had to do it. Her heart would surely thaw. She would step away from her grief and see Tyler in a different light. Spencer himself suffered greatly. When he got the call from the hospital about the car accident and his wife losing the baby, he cried, locked in the police station bathroom. No one saw that, just as no one saw the sleepless nights when Spencer agonized over the loss of the child. But none of that affected his attitude toward Tyler. "Tyler, you probably haven't been outside at all today, have you? Before it gets dark, let's go to the playground." "Okay, play." The boy happily jumped. 12-year-old Tyler returned joyfully from school. 6th grade was behind him. The final grades were in, and once again, everything was excellent. Maybe this time, Mom would be pleased. Tyler tried his best to earn his mother's love. He wanted her to laugh with him, praise him, rejoice in his success, come to kiss him goodnight, finally, like Dad did. But Dad was Dad. He was a serious man with a responsible job. Recently, Dad had been promoted. Now he worked around in a solid police major uniform and headed a whole department. But unfortunately, he was even less at home now. Mom spent much more time with Tyler. Yet, it was as if she wasn't there. She was always distant, always dissatisfied with something. Tyler tried his hardest to study well, to be obedient, but it seemed to have no effect on his mother's attitude. The boy knew why this was happening. 10 years ago, Mom lost a child, and ever since, she's been sad all the time. Dad told Tyler about it, and the boy himself vaguely remembered the dark car that was speeding towards them on the road, remembered the impact. But what was strange was that Mom only felt sad in his, Tyler's, presence. Sometimes she could be quite cheerful when she talked on the phone with her friends or went shopping. But as soon as she looked at her son, her gaze became indifferently distant. Dad assured Tyler that it was just his imagination. Mom really loved him very much. She's just like that, emotionally reserved. Tyler's way home from school passed through the park. They often worked there with Dad. And Dad, for some reason, called it fateful. Although he didn't explain his words. The boy quickly ran along the path, reached the park exit. There were many cars parked along the wrought iron fence. It looked like a parking lot. At the edge stood a large white SUV, and from its open window, the boy heard laughter, so familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Tyler froze. Through the windshield of the car, he clearly saw his emotionally reserved mom laughing cheerfully, sitting in the front seat next to some unfamiliar man. And then something even more awful happened. Mom reached out to this man, hugged him around the neck, and kissed him. Tyler dashed back into the park. His heart was pounding fast. Tyler was 12 years old, and what he just saw was betrayal. That much the boy already understood. Betrayal towards Dad. He didn't want to go home now. There's no one there now. Dad will come in the evening. And then what? Should he tell him what he saw? Then Dad will be upset, and there will be another scandal. Tyler wasn't aware of why Dad and Mom argued. Dad tried not to do it in front of him. But the boy couldn't help but notice how the parents didn't talk to each other for weeks. Meanwhile, near the park gates, Leah slipped out of the SUV. The woman was in high spirits. Today, finally, everything would be resolved. Leah wandered through the shops, bought a new suitcase, and a huge travel bag. She would need them soon. When she returned home, there was nobody there. Leah was slightly surprised because Tyler usually came back from school by this time, but she didn't pay much attention to it. It was even good that he wasn't there. He wouldn't come bothering her with his lessons, grades, and school stories. For a whole decade, Leah had been trying to be a mother to this boy, but she couldn't. She didn't love him. For the entire decade, she couldn't shake off the feeling that it was Tyler's fault that she lost her baby once upon a time. Leah thought the boy didn't notice anything. She treated him absolutely neutrally, hardly ever raised her voice, fed him on time, washed his clothes. You could say she was a normal mother, but she couldn't squeeze any feelings out of herself. Besides, her feelings were somewhere else, with someone else. For 5 whole years now, Leah eagerly awaited the evening when her husband would return home. She anticipated seeing the range of emotions on his face when he found out everything. However, the conversation didn't go as planned. "Where's Tyler?" he asked first thing. "Is he still out?" And then Leah remembered. Indeed, the boy hadn't returned from school yet. When Spencer found out, he panicked, was about to call his son, but didn't have to. Tyler practically entered the apartment right after him. The boy looked lost, didn't look at his parents. In fact, he had been wandering around the park, then sat by the entrance waiting for his father to come home. Tyler didn't know how to behave with his mom after what he had recently seen. "We need to talk, right now," Leah said, leading her husband to their bedroom and making sure Tyler couldn't hear them. "I'm leaving you, Spencer." Leah expected to see a range of emotions on her husband's face, but Spencer didn't give her that pleasure. He looked at her quite indifferently. "So, you finally made up your mind? Or rather, did he finally call you?" "I don't understand." Leah blinked. "Do you know everything?" "Leah, I'm a policeman. When you started your affair with a married man, I figured it out almost immediately. I don't know why I kept quiet. Probably because of Tyler. Your leaving will be a shock to him. Despite everything, the boy is attached to you. Every child needs a mother. As for the man you cheated with, I found out everything a long time ago. He's married and had no intention of divorcing. So what happened now? How did he dare?" "It's very simple. I'm pregnant," Leah said with disgust. "Oh, really?" Spencer said. "So, after all, you've decided. Although for 10 years you kept telling me you weren't ready, you're ready. Just not with me. Well, maybe it's for the best that you're leaving. Tyler will grow up and sooner or later understand that he's not needed by you at all." Tyler, that's all I hear from you. The day he came into our house, our family ended. So live with him now. All you have left is your job and someone else's child. You're a fool, Spencer. Now, with your new position, you can rake in the money. But you don't. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I've already taken my things away during the day. I can't claim the apartment. As you understand, it's your premarital property. But you'll let me take the furniture, won't you? Take whatever you want." Spencer grimaced. "I don't know how you're going to explain your leaving to the child, and I'm not going to explain anything." Leah snapped. "You tell him whatever you want. I don't care anymore. I'm not pretending to be his mother anymore." In the morning, nobody woke Tyler up for school. The school year was over, but out of habit, the boy got up early and found his father preparing breakfast in the kitchen. "Where's Mom?" the boy asked. "Listen, you're almost a grown man now. I need to talk to you seriously. Your mom and I won't be living together anymore. She's gone," Spencer said. "To that guy in the SUV, right?" Tyler timidly asked. "Yeah. When did you see them?" "Yesterday. Dad, I saw them only yesterday, and that's why I didn't want to come home." "But what do you mean, Mom's gone? What about me? Usually, kids stay with their mom." "You'll stay with me," Spencer said. "Are you against it? Will it be bad for us to be alone together?" Tyler mumbled something and looked away. Spencer understood how much it hurt his son that his mother left without taking him or even talking to him. He put a hand on his son's shoulder. "We'll manage," he said confidently, though he didn't feel it. Spencer went to work, and after Tyler had breakfast, he played on the computer for a bit. Then, realizing he didn't want to play, he called his classmate and arranged to meet him in the park. The classmate's name was Cossin. Tyler hadn't been very friendly with him before because Cossin already smoked and even drank beer. The boys went to the far edge of the park, where the trees were thicker, and found a bench completely hidden by bushes. "Let me smoke," Tyler exhaled. "Are you serious?" Cossin's eyes widened. "Our top student and goody-goody wants to try it. I didn't expect that from you." "Well, here," after taking one drag, Tyler coughed spasmodically, but it didn't stop him. His head spun from the smoked cigarette, and Cossin's face seemed to swim in a haze. And then the classmate suggested, "Maybe some beer too." "They won't sell it to us," Tyler said. "But they will sell it to my older brother," Cossin declared. "But he takes his cut for that." "Do you have any money with you?" Spencer tried to come home from work earlier that day. He didn't want Tyler to be alone for too long. However, the boy wasn't in the apartment. Spencer called his son, and Tyler promised to come home soon. Tyler only came at 11, stumbled at the threshold, and fell in the hallway. Spencer was horrified. A drunk 12-year-old boy, with the persistent smell of cigarettes emanating from him. Spencer didn't talk to Tyler that evening. It was useless. Besides, soon the boy started feeling nauseous. Spencer stayed with him all night, afraid to leave him alone. The next morning, they couldn't have a conversation either. Tyler stubbornly refused to get up, and Spencer urgently needed to go to work. And what was there to talk about anyway? Spencer understood that Tyler was suffering because of his mother's departure. It will pass, the man thought, but it didn't pass. A few days later, Spencer had to talk to his son with all severity, even raising his voice. Tyler calmed down a bit, but only in words. While he was doing his son's laundry, the man kept coming across cigarettes, and despite Spencer's numerous attempts to have heartfelt conversations with him, Tyler began to snap back. Spencer felt the challenges of adolescence. His son seemed to have broken free from his chains. Still, Spencer tried not to pressure him too much, hoping that once Tyler accepted his mother's departure, he would calm down. Calm didn't seem to settle in. The new school year started, and there was no trace left of the former straight-A student. Tyler didn't want to study anymore, and his grades plummeted. Moreover, he started getting into trouble and picking fights. When the school principal summoned Spencer for the first time, she was very surprised to see a handsome young man in a major's uniform. "If even people like you can't control your kids, then I don't know what to discuss," she shrugged. "Get to the point. What did my son do?" Spencer asked. "He got into a fight, broke a classmate's nose. It's a serious offense. He could be put on record for this." "No one is putting my son on record. First, we need to understand the reason for the fight. Is that really so important? Any conflict should be resolved with words. Isn't that right?" "You're right," Spencer agreed. "But still, before jumping to conclusions, I need to talk to my son." Exiting the principal's office, Spencer took a deep breath. The incorruptible and uncompromising Major Spencer realized for the first time in his life that he was willing to do anything for the boy he had picked up in the park 10 years ago. Ready, perhaps, even to break the law if necessary. He loved Tyler so much that it seemed impossible to love him more. The club was booming with music, and it was almost impossible to talk. In the dim light, Tyler's classmate Cosson's face twisted in various colors. Cosson danced wildly on the dance floor, then grabbed his friend by the sleeve and, squeezing through the dancers, made his way to the corridor leading to the men's restroom. There, Cosson inspected the restroom, looked into all the stalls, and skillfully pulled out a baggie of some white powder from his pocket. "Look what I got. Want to try?" he said to Tyler. "No way, Cosson." Tyler recoiled. "That's definitely not my thing. I'm not trying it. We're grown-ups now. We're 16, and you've never tried it once. You've got to try everything in life." Cosson insisted. "I won't," Tyler said. At that moment, a commotion was heard from the hall. It grew louder, and suddenly, people in police uniforms flew into the restroom door. Tyler and Cosson were grabbed and pulled out into the hall. As they were being dragged away, Cosson kept pressing against his friend and yelling, "Be careful. You'll break my arm. Be careful." "What's going on?" Spencer chain smoked on the balcony, one cigarette after another. His eyes glanced down, feeling the brightly lit road below. The man was waiting for his son. Somehow, unnoticed, Tyler began to come home later and later. Spencer angrily stubbed out the cigarette on the ashtray. And then, through the slightly open balcony door, the phone rang. Late-night calls weren't unusual for Spencer. He could be pulled out even in the middle of the night. That's the job. But this call was different. "Hello, your son has been detained. He is in the 107th precinct. A bag containing white powder, presumably narcotics, was found on him. I'll be right there. Don't process anything." Spencer yelled and rushed to the door of the apartment. He sped through the streets of nighttime Chicago, breaking the speed limit. As he drove, the last 14 years flashed through his mind. Ever since he found the little boy sitting in the snowdrift with eyes full of sorrow. That boy had grown into an affectionate and obedient child. But after Leah left, Tyler seemed to have changed. Spencer felt guilty. He must have done something wrong. Perhaps he didn't find the right words. Maybe he didn't love him enough. But that's not true. He loves Tyler more than anything else. And now he's racing through Chicago, his hands trembling on the wheel. Trembling with worry and fear. Fear for his son. The police captain sat in a tiny office, filling out a confiscation report, while in front of him sat a young, well-dressed, and very handsome young man, who clearly didn't look like a drug addict. When a man in a major's uniform entered the office, the captain straightened up and was amazed to learn that this man was the detained boy's father. Spencer couldn't believe he was saying this, but he said, "Can't we somehow settle this matter? My son made a mistake. It won't happen again, Major. The report has already been filled out. I can't. Here, this was found with your son." The captain pointed with his pen at the baggie of white powder lying on the table. "Is this?" Spencer asked, taking a step forward and picking up the baggie. Before the captain or Tyler could even blink, Spencer abruptly swallowed the baggie along with its contents. He swallowed and said, "Oh, it's just flour. My son didn't have anything." The captain's eyes widened, and he dropped the pen from his hands. "Spencer, what are you doing?" he managed to say. Tyler was just as shocked as the captain. His upright and honest father couldn't do something like that. It must have been a hallucination. Meanwhile, the captain took the confiscation report from the table, crumpled it up, and threw it in the trash. "Get out of here," he grumbled displeasedly. Spencer took his son and dragged him out of the office. They walked silently through the corridors. Only when they reached the street did Tyler exclaim, "Dad, you are something else. I'm speechless. Didn't expect that from you." Spencer still remained silent. He feared that the white powder in his stomach would start to take effect. Quickly looking around, he went around the corner of the police station and, finding a dark enough corner, induced vomiting. Then he returned to his car and, unable to contain himself, slapped his son. Tyler didn't even pay attention to it. Getting into the car, the young man continued to marvel at his father. "Dad, you're a monster." "Tyler, drugs," Spencer exploded. "You smoke, you drink, you wander at night. But this is the limit. I thought you were smarter than this. But it turns out my son is a moron and a junkie." Spencer's words deeply wounded his son, although he could reassure him now. In fact, that baggie didn't belong to Tyler. The young man suspected how the white powder ended up in his pocket. During the arrest, Cosson was pressing against him. And then, when Tyler was being taken away, Cosson whispered to him, "Your dad will bail you out, but I can't afford to get caught." It happened just like that. However, for some reason, Tyler didn't want to say all this to his dad. Inside him, there was pent-up irritation, deep hurt, and pain. And it had been like this for 4 years since his mother left the family. She never called him once, never expressed a desire to see him. Nothing. It's as if she disappeared from her son's life. Tyler, more unconsciously than intentionally, began to act out, maybe hoping that his mom, upon hearing about it, would come to talk to him. "Yeah, I'm a moron, so what do you want?" I guess Mom always felt that. She felt that I didn't deserve her love. She left you, that's clear. These things happen between men and women. But I'm her son, and she never once called me. Tyler abruptly fell silent, as if choking on his words. Spencer's heart tightened into a knot. So that's what's going on with his Tyler. He believes he doesn't deserve love and misses his mother. "Tyler, I never told you this, but your mom wanted to take you with her when she left. It's me who didn't let her. I forbade her from seeing you. I threatened her with something. I'm a cop, you know. I could. Spencer lied. But what wouldn't he do to ease his child's pain? Let Tyler think his mom loved him and was forced to leave, rather than thinking he wasn't wanted. Tyler froze. So all these 4 years I blamed myself for mom not wanting to see me. And it was you. It was all you. I hate you. Stop the car. Stop the car immediately, or I'll jump out. He opened the door and stuck his foot out. Spencer, scared, began to brake and pull over. The car hadn't fully stopped when Tyler jumped out and, barely keeping his balance, hurried away down the nighttime street. Having run far enough for his father not to see him, the boy took out his phone from his pocket and called a taxi. Leah couldn't sleep. She put her daughter to bed and waited for her husband. The woman's second marriage turned out to be perhaps even less successful than the first. Her new husband kept going back to his ex, with whom Leah forced him to divorce by manipulating her pregnancy. He started living with Leah, but his attitude towards her changed drastically. Turns out, dating and living together are not the same thing at all. Leah was angry, losing sleep at night, but she couldn't do anything about it. At least Spencer didn't cheat on her. This one lives with 2 families. Here it is, 3 in the morning again, and he's still not back. Leah even cried, looking at her peacefully sleeping daughter. The intercom rang. "Mom, let me in. It's me." The woman didn't immediately understand who it was, as Tyler's voice had changed a lot since she last heard him. She pressed the button to open the entrance door, and while Tyler was riding the elevator to the 7th floor, she was lost in guesses as to why he might have come to her. Entering the apartment, Tyler hugged the woman he considered his mother. "Mom, I know everything. Dad told me. He told me that you wanted to take me, so I could live with you, and that he forbade you to visit me." "That's nonsense. It's not true." Leah mechanically pushed the boy away. "That's all a lie. Spencer lied to you. I wasn't going to take you with me, and I didn't want to see you." The boy recoiled from her, as if she had slapped him. "Why didn't you want to?" he muttered. "Then why did Dad lie? Why? Probably to spare your feelings, to avoid upsetting you. Why coddle you? You're already a grown man." "Mom, why? Why didn't you ever come to see me? I understand you have another family, but did you really not love me at all?" "I loved you." Leah hesitated. "But your father always loved you more. So I thought you'd be better off with him." "Listen, Tyler, you should go home now. My husband will be here soon. He might not like your presence." Leah and Tyler stood in the hallway, while in the bedroom, her 3-year-old daughter whimpered in her sleep. And Tyler went there. He leaned over the crib and in the light of the nightlight began to study the little face. "Is this my little sister? Huh?" he whispered to Leah. "She doesn't even know she has an older brother. I want to see her. I will see her. And you can't stop me." Perhaps those words were the last straw for Leah. Grabbing him by the sleeve of his bomber jacket, she dragged Tyler into the hallway, and there she exploded. "She's not your sister. You hear me? You're not even related to her. And I'm not your mother. Stop hiding it from you already. You're not little anymore. You should understand everything. You're not our own. We adopted you." It was 2 years old then. Spencer was coming home from work through the park, the same park he called fateful. And you were sitting there, right in the snowdrift, little, freezing. Spencer brought you home, and somehow he immediately bonded with you. So we adopted you, but I couldn't love you as my own. And do you know why? Because I was pregnant at the time. I took you to the daycare, and we got hit by a car. I lost the baby. You know this story. I always thought, if it wasn't for you, everything would have been different. I would have kept the pregnancy. Now do you understand why I never loved you as a real mother?" Leah blurted it out and unexpectedly burst into tears. She realized what she had done and was afraid that Spencer would kill her now for sure. Tyler never came home. Spencer, unable to sleep until morning, kept trying to call his son over and over again. The phone was unreachable. Spencer speculated where Tyler might be. Of course, he's looking for his mother. Spencer called his ex-wife. Unexpectedly, Leah almost burst into tears on the phone. "Forgive me. I don't even know how it happened. I didn't want to." "What are you talking about, Leah?" the man asked. "What didn't you want? What did you do? And you still don't know?" "I told Tyler he was adopted. It just slipped out. Accidentally." Spencer wanted to strangle his ex-wife, but he just gritted his teeth, called her a fool. Then he went to look for his son. He had suspicions where Tyler might be. At his classmates, cousins, with whom they had grown very close lately. Spencer wasn't wrong. Cousin opened the door and rolled his eyes. "Are you here for Tyler? Just take him away from here already. He's driving me crazy." Tyler was very drunk, and while Spencer dragged him to his car, he tried to struggle and mumble something. And as they drove home, he fell asleep in the car. Spencer carried his son up to the apartment. He laid him on the bed, saying, "Sleep. We'll talk later." Spencer didn't go to work that day, afraid that Tyler might run off again, and they needed to talk. And the conversation was not going to be easy. It only took place in the evening. Spencer sat in the living room, clicking the TV remote, unable to concentrate on anything. Tyler, awake now, came out of his bedroom. He walked into his father's room and sat down in the armchair opposite the man, with a challenging look. "Well, Major, what about your lie to your own son? Or rather, not your son, as it turned out, but someone else's. A stranger's child. What exactly are you accusing me of, Tyler?" Spencer asked, looking the boy straight in the eyes. "What am I guilty of in front of you? Is it a crime that I adopted a boy 14 years ago? Is that it? I'm accusing you of lying to me all these years." "Lying? Is that what you call it? What did you want? For me to tell you from childhood that you were adopted, and that your mom never managed to treat you as her own? Is that what you wanted? Maybe Leah couldn't, but I always treated you as my own, and you can't deny that." Tyler hung his head. His childhood had been happy. Trips to the seaside, visits to water parks, cinemas, amusement parks, and always his dad by his side, even when the so-called mom didn't want to go with them, citing headaches, business. Dad was always there. "Why so quiet? Nothing to say? You wanted to accuse me of something, so let's hear it." Spencer continued. "Who is my real mother?" Tyler asked without lifting his head. "How would I know?" Spencer sighed. "I found you in the park in a snowdrift. You were dressed rather poorly, and there was a note in your hand. Something like, 'I can't support him. I'm giving up the child.' So, it turns out, my mother was a troubled alcoholic, most likely." Spencer shrugged. "But there's something else. You never had toy guns. You know that. And that's because when we were going through the adoption process, I took you to a toy store. And when you saw a gun, you had a panic attack. You screamed so loud that all the store staff gathered. I immediately took you to a psychiatrist, and he explained to me that such a reaction probably wasn't groundless. Something happened before your eyes. Probably something terrible. That's why your brain blocked all memories. At 2 years old, your life started over like a clean slate. And what could that be?" Tyler perked up. "Could it be that my real mother was killed before my eyes?" "Unlikely. Someone brought you to the park and left a note. So, you didn't try to find out anything. You're in the police, and it shouldn't have been difficult for you." "I tried. Tyler, I tried. I checked all the firearm-related incidents that happened in Chicago at that time. Nothing like that involving a 2-year-old child. But maybe you didn't check properly, Dad. Maybe it's worth doing it again. You see, I only found out yesterday that I'm adopted. And you know, if you think about it, I'm grateful to you for adopting me. True, Dad, who knows what would have happened to me in the orphanage. But still, I want to know who my real mother is and what made her abandon me in the park. Will you help me? Spencer pondered. Digging into events from 14 years ago wasn't easy. All right. The man agreed. I'll try to find out again, but on one condition. You stop your partying and go back to school. Tyler, I know you are not like this. It's a kind of rebellion. I didn't understand before what it was directed against. Turns out, you were upset about your mother. I agree. Dad, Tyler nodded. And you know what? About the drug use. I never tried it. That wasn't my bag. Really, Spencer believed him. He knew his son too well. Spencer was firm in his belief that he was raising a good person. Spencer kept his promise to his son and started looking for information. He requested all cases from those years within a 500-kilometer radius of Chicago that seemed suspicious, and he reviewed them in his office until late at night. With a couple of young police officers assisting him, several days had passed in vain, and Spencer began to despair. But by the end of the week, on one of those evenings, a young police officer in Spencer's office exclaimed loudly, "I found it. Looks like I found something. Spencer, come here. Look, Fosstown." On the night of December 24th to 25th, a deranged housekeeper shot the owner of the Pharmatech company along with his wife and abducted their 2-year-old child. The boy's name was Tyler Rust. Neither the criminal nor the child has been found since. Spencer jumped up from his desk and rushed to the laptop. On the screen, a photo of an unfamiliar woman stared at Spencer. "This is the housekeeper's photo," explained the police officer. "And here are photos of the deceased family." The young police officer clicked, and Spencer jerked his whole body. A beautiful family. A wife. A husband holding a little son in his arms. Spencer didn't need to look at the child's face. It was enough to see the father. Those black, straight brows, expressive eyes. 16-year-old Tyler looked very much like him. Turning his gaze to the boy, Spencer flinched again. It was his Tyler. Little Tyler. Who was the deranged woman who shot them? Spencer asked hoarsely. She killed them, and she also shot her husband the same evening. Apparently, he opposed her kidnapping the child. Here, look at these leads on her. She's still wanted. The police officer replied. A strange story. Spencer shook his head. On the 24th, she kidnaps the child, and on the 25th, she dumps him in Chicago. Why? Moreover, when I found him, the boy was wearing some shabby clothes and had a note. There was a note. This woman did everything so that people would think that Tyler was abandoned by an unfit mother. Yes, nodded the young police officer. She might have done it deliberately so that the boy wouldn't be found. His family was very wealthy. They promised a big reward to whoever found the boy. Who promised? So, Tyler still has relatives? Spencer exclaimed with excitement. No, not relatives, Spencer. Here, read this. The police officer pointed to the screen. It was Robert Coleman, the business partner of the Pharmatech company. He was looking for his friend and partner's child, although not quite a partner. It turns out that almost the entire company belonged to the deceased and his son. Your son, Spencer. Sorry. So, Tyler is the sole heir. There were no other relatives. Robert took over Pharmatech as the manager until Tyler is found. Pharmatech. Sounds familiar, chimed in the second police officer. Listen, we don't have a company with that name in Chicago, do we? We do. It's the same company. They expanded, and they moved to Chicago. Here's the main office address. So, what does this mean? Your Tyler is wealthy. He owns a controlling stake in Pharmatech. Well, if you can prove that he's the one. Yeah, what's there to prove? Spencer nodded at the photo of his son's real father on the laptop screen. There's nothing to prove here. Just look at his biological father's face. Spencer drove home feeling upset. He didn't know how to react to such news. His Tyler turned out to be not the son of a drinking troublemaker, but the child of loving parents. Everything fell into place. Apparently, Tyler witnessed the housekeeper shooting his mom and dad. Hence, his reaction to the toy gun and that memory block. Spencer didn't know how Tyler would react to such news, but the boy was very happy. "Dad, so it turns out, I wasn't abandoned. I wasn't an unwanted burden." In the dimly lit restaurant hall, classical music played softly. Robert didn't understand such music, but his wife loved it dearly. A petite blonde with huge gray eyes. Kristen was already in her 40s, but she still looked like a delicate girl. Robert gazed into her eyes and drowned in them. For this woman, he was willing to do anything: steal, kill, commit any crime. For her sake, he left his wife and 2 daughters in Fosstown, and he prayed that Kristen would never find out. For her, he had been considered a divorced man since they met. Robert had been married to her for 5 years, but it felt like he couldn't get enough of her. For the first time in his life, he felt a feeling he had never believed in before. He met Kristen in Chicago when he was opening his main office, and he couldn't believe such a woman was not married. Later, it turned out that Kristen was born with some condition that prevented her from having children. Because of this, she avoided men all her life, considering herself inadequate. She didn't initially see Robert as a man, but he courted her so long and so beautifully that she gave in. The security guard and Robert's faithful confidant, Noel, disapproved of these relationships from the very beginning. "Robert, she's not right for you. She's not like us. She's like she's not from this world," Noel would say. "That's what I like about her." Robert would smile. "Noel, you don't need to convince me. No matter what you say, Kristen will be mine." And Kristen became his. But Robert couldn't help but understand that she didn't know the real him. He had to pretend. If she found out the true Robert Coleman, she would run away from him in horror. Kristen couldn't stay at home without work. And when she expressed a desire to take over all the accounting at Pharma Tech Company, Robert was horrified. His chief accountant was a trusted man. He knew where to add, where to erase. He was a professional in all shady schemes. But Kristen shouldn't know about this. Naturally, she believed that Pharma Tech Company was spotless. Robert couldn't refuse his wife. So since then, there had been double bookkeeping in Pharma Tech. One for Kristen, and the other, the real one. Noel didn't understand Robert, but he kept silent. Kristen meant everything to Robert. For her sake, he paid double salaries to employees just to make sure she wouldn't find out about the schemes in the company. For her, he pretended to be someone else and was ready to pretend all his life. As long as she was by his side, looking at him with her pure, huge eyes. Just like now. "Robert, you should have ordered this salad. It has seafood. Very tasty." "It is," Kristen smiled. "You know I prefer meat." Robert smiled back at her. The restaurant where he and Kristen dined wasn't cheap, and there was strict face control here. Robert wasn't surprised when a man of about their age approached their table. This man with a steely gaze was well dressed, and there was an inner strength about him. From his tone, it was clear that he was used to giving orders. What surprised Robert was that this man addressed him directly. "Are you Robert Coleman?" Robert frowned at the approaching man, not saying anything. "With your permission, I'll sit down. I have a serious conversation with you, Spencer." And it was him, brazenly took a chair from another table and sat right between Kristen and Robert. Robert didn't like the situation at all. Who was this guy, and why was he behaving so boldly? "I understand," Robert put down his fork, "that you want to talk to me specifically. Then you should make an appointment with my secretary." "I don't have time for that," Spencer grimaced. "Let's skip the formalities." "How did you know I would be in this restaurant?" "It wasn't difficult for me, given where I work." Robert felt uncomfortable. Military demeanor, icy, assessing gaze. Who was this man? "Then maybe you'll serve me with a subpoena," Robert said. "No need for that. I have a personal conversation with you, and it concerns Victor Rust, the deceased owner of Pharma Tech." Robert, holding a wine glass, startled. The red wine spilled onto the snowy tablecloth. And then Robert's wife, Kristen, decided to join the conversation. "You seem to be mistaken. Robert told me everything. Victor Rust was his friend and owned a small stake in the company. My husband is the real owner." "No, you seem to be mistaken." Spencer looked at Kristen for the first time. "Kristen, I'll explain everything later." Robert took his wife's hand in his. Spencer noticed how tenderly Robert did it. But, for some reason, he liked this man less and less. "What do you want?" Robert asked nervously. "Victor's death is a sore subject for me, despite the years that have passed. He was a close friend to me." "Then all the more reason. I want to give you good news. We probably found Victor's son, Tyler." Despite Robert's attempt to keep himself composed, he startled for the second time. Kristen noticed it. "Robert, this is wonderful." She opened her huge gray eyes wide. "You told me how long and unsuccessfully you searched for the son of your deceased friend." "Exactly. Long and unsuccessfully." Robert let go of his wife's hand and turned to Spencer. "How do you know it's Tyler? Where did you find him?" I expressed myself a bit incorrectly. "I didn't find him. This is my son, whom I adopted 14 years ago." "What an interesting story." Robert laughed artificially. "And why do you think I'll believe you? How can you prove that this guy is Victor's son?" "Probably not yet." Spencer suddenly stood up. "Let's talk some other time." "Goodbye." Spencer left. He didn't want to continue this conversation. He was good at reading people, and he didn't like Robert at all. He didn't like his reaction to this news. Spencer didn't go to Robert with Tyler right away. He decided to feel the ground first, and the result was very unsatisfactory. Just like everything in this tangled story, Spencer carefully studied the case materials about what happened in Fosstown. There were no direct evidence against the housekeeper, except for the kidnapping of the child. And Spencer had a strong feeling that this case was fabricated. Robert had been so persistent in searching for Tyler, promising a reward. But if you look at it from another angle, why would he do that? He's considered the sole owner of Pharmatech now. Even his own wife, apparently, thinks so. The gaze of that woman was still in Spencer's mind. Such beauty, natural and genuine, is rarely found nowadays. He had a strong feeling that such a woman didn't belong next to someone like Robert. Robert was shaken. So many years had passed, and he had hoped that Tyler would never be found. Had it really happened? Robert decided to take Pharmatech into his own hands back then, at such a high cost. So would he now hand over his life's work to some boy? He certainly wouldn't allow that. Kristen noticed the tension in Robert, but couldn't understand the reason behind it. After the man, who didn't even introduce himself, left, Robert became nervous, answering randomly. She rarely saw her husband in such a state. Despite all her airiness and lightness, Kristen was not a foolish woman. Robert had fooled her well, with his charm and care, and she fell for his kindness. However, after 5 years of marriage, Kristen began to realize that this man was never truly himself with her. It was just a facade, and she didn't want to know what was hidden beneath it. Working at Pharmatech, she quickly realized that the documents and reports she dealt with were not entirely genuine. There was something else. Something behind her back. Some major schemes. Kristen tried to find out, and once the necessary folder almost fell into her hands. But then Noel appeared silently before her. Noel instilled horror in Kristen. Not with his repulsive appearance or the scar on his chin, but with his eyes. In those eyes, there was an abyss, and Kristen felt it. Just the fact that a man like Noel was with her husband did not speak well for Robert. The appearance of the confident man in the restaurant and his message that his adopted son could turn out to be Tyler Rust completely threw Robert off balance. He sat at the table for a while. Then, as if awakening, he jumped up and, apologizing to Kristen, rushed into the corridor leading to the toilets. On the move, he pulled out his phone from his pocket. Kristen followed. pretending that she also needed to use the restroom. At that moment, her husband turned the corner and called Noel. Kristen didn't hear the beginning of the conversation, only the end. Yes, he just left the restaurant. Follow him, Noel. Find his adopted son. I'm in shock myself. But what if this is really Tyler? Kristen returned to their table. What had frightened Robert so much? If it was indeed his deceased friend's son, shouldn't he be happy about it? Noel sat in the car near the restaurant entrance, waiting for Robert and his wife to come out. He noticed the tall man with a determined face leaving, and after Robert's call, he immediately understood who the boss was talking about. By this time, Spencer's white SUV had already driven off, but Noel saw which way it went and quickly took off in hopes of catching up. Spencer was heading home, glancing in the rearview mirror. He saw how quickly the black Jeep was speeding and then abruptly slowed down, falling in behind the SUV. I thought so. Spencer smirked. Robert, you're not as simple as you seem. The news of the heir scared you. Ha! Spencer could easily evade the car following him, but he didn't. He wasn't going to hide. On the contrary, he would return to Tyler what rightfully belonged to him by law. Spencer was honest enough to admit to himself that he was not very pleased to discover that Tyler was the heir to Pharma Tech. It would have been much easier if Tyler were the child of some neglectful parent. Easier for Spencer, but not for his son. Tyler was very happy to learn that he wasn't abandoned after all. Dad, I don't need this Pharma Tech, but I want to know about my real parents. Sorry, it might be uncomfortable for you. I love you, Dad. I know, Tyler, and I understand your desire, but it would be somewhat unfair to turn a blind eye to the fact that you're the heir to this company. As much as I might not want it, I don't want the hassle with big money. Well, technically, it's your biological father's money. And of course, ultimately, he would want to pass everything on to you. So let's try to restore your name. But, for starters, I'll go to Robert alone. Kristen woke up in a cold sweat. She looked around. For the 1000th time, the question popped into her head. What was she doing here? And this question was about the person who was lying next to her in bed. Kristen glanced at the other half of the huge bed and sighed. Robert wasn't there, or else he would have surrounded her again with that fake concern. Although why fake? Robert was actually very caring towards her. It's just that his care resembled that of a wolf pretending to be a lapdog. Kristen realized that she wasn't living with the person she had married. That person didn't exist. Robert was pretending, and she believed him. The realization that she was with a man who was absolutely alien to her in spirit, cruel and dishonest, began to come about 2 years ago. And now Kristen would have left him without hesitation. But she was afraid. Yes, she was afraid of Robert, and she knew he wouldn't let her go easily. She was his beloved toy, which he clung to with all his claws. Where was her husband now? Apparently, he couldn't sleep, given the recent events. The appearance of that man in the restaurant had scared Robert so much. In fact, Kristen knew that Robert was not the owner of Pharma Tech. It would be foolish to think that she hadn't figured it out while working in the company. But Robert wanted her to believe so, and Kristen remained silent. Kristen threw on her robe and went downstairs. Without turning on the light, she entered the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and then went back to the bedroom. The staircase to the second floor led from the corridor, smoothly transitioning into the hall. It was from this hall that Robert and Noel's voices could be heard. Kristen froze. Robert's voice sounded very excited, and Noel, as always, remained calm. Well, have you found out anything? Robert asked excitedly. I found out everything. Major Spencer approached you in the restaurant. He heads the 105th precinct. 12 years ago, he adopted a boy, and that boy is indeed Tyler Rust. Noel replied. What makes you think it's really Tyler? Robert snapped. Robert, I saw him. Noel said. And so what? Robert froze. It's definitely Tyler. There's no doubt about it. It even made me uneasy. as if I had seen a young Victor. There was a tense pause, and in that ringing silence, Kristen froze in the corridor, afraid to reveal herself. But we still need to prove it, Robert said. This brat certainly won't get the company. Terrified, Kristen rushed back to the bedroom. Her heart pounded, ringing in her ears. Right now, she heard the voice of the real Robert. The next day, Spencer was sorting through papers in his office when the receptionist called him from the first floor. "Spencer, there's a visitor insisting on seeing you. I know it's not allowed, but she refuses to leave." "Who is this visitor? What's it about?" Spencer asked, surprised. "She's not saying." The receptionist hesitated. "She just says that you saw her yesterday at the restaurant." Kristen's face immediately appeared before Spencer's eyes. "Let her come up," Spencer said. He smoothed his hair, straightened up his desk, adjusted his tie. He caught himself doing this and frowned. What was he doing? Yes, the woman was very attractive, but why was he getting nervous? This woman wasn't available, and besides, she was married to not the most pleasant person. Kristen timidly entered the office, greeted quietly, took a few steps towards the long table, and froze. Spencer jumped up and pulled out a chair from under the table for Kristen. He behaved like a schoolboy, hardly daring to look the woman in the eye. And when he did, he saw fear, sheer panic there. Kristen no longer looked like that carefree and beautiful fool she was yesterday at the restaurant. She bit her lip, unsure how to start the conversation. She asked herself why she had come here in the first place. Maybe she sensed some inner strength in this man. But Robert also had strength, only of a completely different kind. "I want to warn you, Robert won't give up the company to Tyler Rust," Kristen said. "Yesterday, he sent his security guard to follow you. Noel came back and said that you work here and that your Tyler is indeed Victor Rust's son." Robert didn't like that at all. "That's all clear." Spencer barely smiled. "I work in the police. Of course, I noticed that I was being followed. What I don't understand is this. You're Robert's wife. Why are you here?" Kristen raised her big eyes to him, and Spencer saw fear in them again. "You're afraid of him," the man guessed. "You're afraid of your own husband. Why don't you leave him then?" "I don't know. Leaving Robert scares me the most. Sometimes he can be so." Kristen fell silent, unable to find the words. And suddenly Spencer was overwhelmed by an unfamiliar feeling. He wanted to hug this fragile woman, protect her from everything in the world. "I wanted to warn you," Kristen said. "Robert will never admit that your son is Tyler. He will do anything to keep Pharmatech, like he does with you, right? I understand that Robert doesn't like to give up what he considers his own. Don't go back to him. I can see you don't want to," Spencer said. "I don't want to, but I'll go back," Kristen said. "I'll go back to divorce him honestly. I'm not going to hide. And I also want to learn more about Victor. It's starting to seem to me that Robert isn't telling me everything about his former friend." "Don't get involved in this," Spencer panicked. "I've already checked some things. Robert isn't so simple. And this murder case is very suspicious. I bought a ticket, and tomorrow morning I'm going to Force Town to try to find out something on the spot. Can I come later? Will you tell me what you found out? I want to figure it out for myself too." With a heavy heart, Spencer escorted Kristen out. He knew this woman for so little time, and yet it seemed like a lifetime. He didn't want to let her go to Robert. His heart foreboded something sinister. The next morning, Spencer left for Force Town. There, in this small town, the first thing he did was go to the chief of the local police and ask to familiarize himself with the case of the murder of Victor and his wife. Spencer could feel how tense this middle-aged man, who had been in his position for over 25 years, became. "And why is that?" the local policeman asked, twisting the pen in his nervous fingers. "Everything is clear with this case. What's your interest in it?" "Perhaps my adopted son is Tyler Rust, missing that night. Will you acquaint me with the case?" "Well, only in my presence." A few minutes later, Spencer immersed himself in studying the papers. The local police chief had already reported to Robert by phone about such an unexpected visit. So I thought. Spencer leaned back in his chair. No direct evidence or clues against the housekeeper. How did they even come up with the idea that she killed them and declared her the prime suspect? How? The middle-aged man in uniform bulged his eyes. She stole the child. Look. Spencer pointed to one of the papers. Here it says that there were deep traces in the snowdrift. The housekeeper jumped from the second floor. But why would she do that? Why didn't she just leave with the child through the door after she shot Victor and his wife? She went crazy. It's obvious. If she hadn't lost her mind, would she have started shooting at people she had worked for years? Who knows what goes through the mind of a mad woman? But what if we assume she was perfectly sane? What would her jump from the second floor suggest? It looks more like she was running away from someone. And she wasn't stealing the child. She was saving him. Saving the child from whom? Well, maybe from someone who had something to gain from it. Again, in the case materials, it says that Eleanor took a taxi to get to her house. She didn't talk to the driver, but he noticed that the woman was wearing worn-out boots and an old coat, in which she wrapped the child. Have you seen many worn-out boots and old coats in the homes of rich people? Where did she get these things? Did you ask? Maybe from the guard at the cottage community gate. The taxi driver picked her up there, the police chief said, then bit his tongue, realizing he said too much. Aha. Then where are the statements from this guard? Why aren't they in the case file? I can't believe you didn't question him, Spencer protested. I hope you can at least give me his address. I'll go to him right now. When Spencer rushed out of the station, the office owner made a phone call. Robert, things are not looking good. This guy ran off to talk to the guard. Yes, that one, whose statements we didn't include in the case. The old man was talking nonsense back then. You remember, Robert. How could I not give him the address? What would he have thought then? Listen, this old man was already pretty old back then. Let's hope he's not alive anymore. And if he is, what can he remember at that age? The guard who worked at the exit of the cottage community 14 years ago was 78 years old. And he was a very lively old man with a great memory. Spencer found him outside his house, sweeping fallen leaves off the asphalt. Recognizing who had come to see him, the elderly man was very pleased to have the opportunity to talk. I remember everything. How can you forget something like that? The whole town was buzzing. Victor was a good man. Not like some people from this community. He would get out of the car, shake hands, ask how you're doing. He knew me by name. It's a shame what happened to him. What happened? Do you think Eleanor didn't do it? No, of course not. I kept telling the police back then. Eleanor came running to me that night, terrified, clutching the child to her. She told me they killed Victor and his wife, and they wanted Tyler. And she loved that boy, so she jumped from the second floor with him in her arms. She was scared to death. I gave her my boots and coat that night. I told everyone, but no one listened to me. Kristen wandered around the house, never parting with her phone. She always kept it with her, tucked in the pocket of her house dress. She was eagerly awaiting a call from Spencer, who was supposed to go to Forstown today. Kristen felt that Spencer was honest. This man couldn't lie or pretend like Robert. As soon as Kristen thought about her husband, he appeared in the dining room where she was having tea. Robert was agitated and kept glancing at his watch. When Noel appeared in the dining room, Kristen understood what her husband was waiting for. Without exchanging words, the men almost ran to Robert's office. It was clear they were going to discuss something, and Kristen had a pretty good idea of what it was. Kristen picked up the cup of half-drunk tea from the table and pretended to stroll around the house, occasionally taking sips from the cup as she walked towards the office. The door was closed, but if one pressed their ear against it, they could hear the conversation. Robert, this major is a tough and complicated man. I got the information as you requested. Everyone says it's better not to mess with him. He doesn't even take bribes. There's nothing to catch him on. But if he sets his sights on something, he won't let go. His grip is ironclad. That's exactly it. An iron grip. And now he's fixated on my pharmaceutic. Of course, such a hefty prize falling from the sky. He won't miss out on that. The major probably thanks God every day for adopting the boy, Robert. They say he really loves the boy like his own. I heard a story. Don't know if it's true, but rumors have it that when Tyler was caught with drugs, the major came and ate them. He'd tear anyone apart for his son. If something happens to Tyler, he'll annihilate us. That's right, Noel. That's why I'm telling you, we need to make it look like an accident. You've actually given a great idea. If Tyler has drug problems, and it's already known, then we need to stage an overdose for him. It'll be foolproof. The kid miscalculated the dose, and we need to do it now, while it's still not proven that he's Tyler Rust. I mean, technically, I don't even believe it, so they can't drag me into this. No vested interest, Robert. I heard the major went to Fosstown today. What if he finds out something there? What could he possibly find out there? Even if he suspects that Eleanor had nothing to do with it, how can he prove our involvement after so many years? He can't. And the fact that he's not in town right now is actually good. We need to use that to our advantage and act fast. You know the address. Go to Tyler. Go right now. Seeing doubt on Noel's face, Robert lost his temper. What? Are you scared? I can't believe you'd be afraid of anything. When you killed Victor and his wife, your hand didn't shake. You shot Eleanor's husband calmly. And now what? It's your fault you let the boy slip through your fingers back then. So finish what you started. Kristen, standing behind the door, heard every word. Her hand, holding the teacup, was shaking and fell to the floor, shattering loudly. Before she could retreat from the office, fast footsteps approached, and Noel's hand pulled her inside. Let her go. Robert exclaimed, "Release my wife. Don't you dare lay a finger on her." She heard everything. Everything. Under Noel's heavy gaze, Kristen felt like she wanted to sink through the floor. Noel's fingers eventually loosened, and Kristen, stumbling, pressed her back against the wall next to the office door. Robert tried to smile and act as usual, but it wasn't working. Well, so what? She's my wife. Right, Kristen? You'll keep quiet, won't you? I'll explain everything to you. Robert approached the woman and reached out to her, but from the way she recoiled, how she pressed herself harder against the wall, and the horror in her eyes, Robert realized she wouldn't understand, and she probably wouldn't keep quiet. Noel understood it too. Robert, speaking of accidents, you can fall down the stairs, break your neck, he said, looking grimly at Kristen. Shut up. Don't even think about it. You won't touch my wife. Robert made another attempt to reach Kristen, and she recoiled in disgust. Kristen, you'll sit in the basement for now. Noel and I need to sort something out, and then I'll come to you, and we'll talk. I'll explain everything to you. Noel dragged Kristen to the basement. Noel, as he left, he slammed the heavy wooden door shut. But what Noel didn't know was about the phone in the pocket of Kristen's house dress, and Kristen remembered it. The first thing she did was take it out and call Spencer. Spencer, your son is in danger. Noel is going after him. They want to stage a drug overdose. Noel and my husband killed Tyler's parents. Spencer, can you hear me? Before she could hear Spencer's voice, someone was running heavily toward the basement door. Kristen pressed the disconnect button and hid the phone in her pocket again. However, Noel returned to the basement with a specific purpose. Where's your phone? He shouted from the threshold. It's not in the room. Where is it? Noel took a step toward Kristen, and she, afraid that he would start searching her, quickly pulled out her phone from her pocket and handed it to him. Noel threw it against the wall and turned to Robert. who was standing in the doorway. What if she managed to call someone? Robert asked. Kristen, did you call anyone? Robert asked, almost tenderly. The woman shook her head negatively and added, I forgot about the phone. I didn't remember it was in my pocket. See, she forgot. She wasn't thinking about the phone right now. She's in shock. Robert persuaded Noel. He was persuading himself. Understanding one thing. He couldn't harm this woman because he couldn't live without her. He loved Kristen, and he knew that once she found out who he really was, she would turn away from him in horror, just like now. And still, he was willing to lose, but not this woman. Let's go. Noel, let her sit for now. I'll talk to her later. You have more important matters to attend to now. After Kristen's frightened call, Spencer tried to call her back, but the number was already unavailable. Spencer started calling his son. Tyler didn't pick up. By that time, Spencer was already at the train station, waiting for the train to Chicago. He had a couple of hours to wait. Spencer kept dialing Tyler again and again. His hands began to tremble with fear for his son. How could he have been such a fool? Why did he go to Forcetown, leaving Tyler alone? The whole picture became clear to him. Robert got rid of his friend, intending to take over the company completely. The maid would have interfered by rescuing the child. That's why he had been searching for the boy for so long and promising a reward. Totaya Plusens. How could Spencer not realize this right away? Waiting at the train station was unbearable. Spencer ran to the taxi stand outside the station building, still calling his son. He got into a taxi. Spencer called his son, and images from the past flashed before his eyes. He was everything to this stern man in life. Spencer couldn't even imagine what it would be like to live without Tyler. They were already a quarter of the way to Chicago when Tyler answered his father with a rather carefree voice. Yeah, Dad, what's up? So many missed calls. Why didn't you pick up the phone? Spencer yelled. What are you doing there? I had my headphones on. I was listening to music. I'll tear your headphones apart and throw them away. Do you hear me? I'll smash them into tiny pieces. What's wrong, Dad? Why are you yelling like that? Listen to me carefully, Tyler. This is very serious. What I'm telling you now is very serious. Dad, hold on. Someone's ringing the doorbell. I'll go open it. Weird. There was no call on the intercom. Maybe it's one of the neighbors. Continuing to talk to his father, Tyler reached out to open the front door without looking. Spencer's roar shook even the taxi driver, who swerved on the road. Don't open it. The man roared. Do you hear me, Tyler? Don't open the door. Step away from it and pretend nobody is home. It's dangerous, very dangerous. Don't you dare open that door. From the roar of his father through the phone receiver, Tyler's hand, already reaching for the lock, jerked and fell. He had never heard his father so frightened. Dad, in general, never feared anything. Holding the phone to his ear, as his father instructed, the boy cautiously looked through the peephole, and then a sticky terror engulfed the boy himself. He didn't understand where this terror came from. It seemed like there was a man in a hoodie and with a scar on his chin standing by the door. But that scar and the hoodie, why did Tyler suddenly see the barrel of a gun before his eyes? And he wanted to scream in fear, just like he did 14 years ago in the toy store. Although Tyler didn't remember that. Overcoming the inexplicable sense of fear, Tyler forced himself to look through the peephole more carefully. The man behind the door took off his hood and tried to force a smile. Tyler, open up. I'm from your dad. Spencer forgot something at the department and told me to bring it home. Tyler recoiled from the door, clearly realizing the danger he was in. Tyler stood in the hallway, stepping back a few steps from the front door, and pressed the phone to his ear. And then there was a barely audible scraping from the door. Dad, are you there? Tyler whispered into the receiver. I think this person is trying to break into our door. His father's voice became clear and commanding. Listen carefully. Take something very heavy in your hands. That bronze statue they gave me at the service will do. Do you hear me, Tyler? Take it in your hands and stand to the right of the door. As soon as this person tries to enter with all his might, hit him on the head. Tyler, this person is coming to kill you. Act first. Be decisive. I beg you. Hit him on the head and run into the apartment. Run down the stairs to the street, or knock on the neighbors' doors. Act according to the circumstances. And now I'll disconnect for a while and try to do something else. Don't be afraid. Tyler, you're a police officer's son. There were short beeps in the receiver, and Tyler ran for the statue. Noel was trying to pick the lock with makeshift tools, wire, and a small knife. He had to act in a way that wouldn't leave any traces of tampering. The boy behind the door, Noel felt it. And the fact that Tyler didn't want to open the door to him spoke volumes. Noel understood that he couldn't deviate from the plan and needed to see it through. Considering himself a professional, the man couldn't forgive himself for a mistake made 14 years ago. Noel was tinkering with the lock when the door of the apartment opposite suddenly swung open. Out hobbled a man around 35, one leg encased in a cast. He looked out of breath and leaned against the wall for support. "Hey, what are you doing?" It's clear the neighbors aren't home. With a discreet but swift movement, Noel stashed his homemade lockpick up his sleeve and, turning halfway, glanced at the guy in the cast. Was it another setback? Without giving the guy in the cast a chance to see his face, Noel quickly pulled up his hood and dashed down the stairs, seething with anger. What was it about this boy that was always being protected? Meanwhile, the neighbor, whom Noel cursed, held the phone to his ear. He had been holding it when he burst out of the apartment, which meant he had been in contact with Spencer, his neighbor, across the landing. "Listen, Spencer, there really was a man messing with your door," he said tensely. "Where is this man?" Spencer asked. "Did you see his face?" "He ran down the stairs as soon as I came out. He threw his hood up over his face. I couldn't make him out. The only thing I noticed was a big scar on his chin." "Listen, what's going on over there? You don't know what you've just done for Tyler and me. Take my Tyler. Let him stay in your apartment until I get back," Spencer said. Ahead of Spencer lay a difficult task. He never feared difficult tasks and jumped into them with enthusiasm. But not now. This was too personal and too scary for his son. Suddenly, Kristen's face appeared before his eyes. How could he have forgotten about her? She had managed to warn him. But the conversation ended so abruptly. Kristen had been sitting in the basement for several hours. Robert had come down recently, trying to talk to her. "Kristen, you have to understand me. Victor was never my friend. He was a dangerous man. He was planning to get rid of me. And it came down to either him or me. Who would do it first? I did it not to take over the company, but simply to save my life." Kristen remained silent, staring at her husband with wide eyes filled with horror. Robert looked away, unable to bear the way his beloved wife was looking at him, as if he were a wild animal. "I know what you want to ask me," Robert continued. "Why am I also trying to get rid of the boy? Well, you just can't imagine what kind of family this is. Victor was a monster, and I believe his son is just like him. I've been running the company for so many years. I've put my soul into it. Expanded, multiplied assets, and all for what? To hand it all over to this boy. If he's anything like his father, he'll get rid of me quickly. Kristen, aren't we living well together? I love you. We are wealthy. Why can't we just leave everything as it is now? We'll get rid of the obstacle and live happily. Kristen, do you believe me? Will you stay silent?" The instinct of self-preservation made the woman nod her head and repeat, "Yes, Robert. Yes, I won't tell anyone. Everything will be as before." She lied so blatantly that even Robert, blinded by his love for her, could see it. But he didn't want to acknowledge it. "Is that true, Kristen? Will you stay with me? And we'll forget everything that happened?" Robert approached his wife. trying to embrace her. But this time she couldn't pretend anymore. Kristen recoiled, and her face twisted with disgust and fear. Robert stepped back, turned away, not wanting to see what feelings he aroused in his beloved wife. You think about it, Kristen. If you turn me into the police, will it bring you happiness? What will you do without me? Go back to your parents' house. Where will you find someone who will love you like I do? Understand one thing, Kristen. Behind big money there's always some dirt. All these people in power, do you really think they don't have skeletons in their closets? Robert left, slamming the heavy door behind him. Kristen, trembling, sank into an old chair. She understood that she had only one way to freedom. She needed to pretend, so that Robert would believe her. But how to do it when even his touch evoked in her a shiver of animal horror? Robert went upstairs, walked into the living room, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and drank it in one gulp. He had to make a decision. Noel would soon return and insist that Kristen was now a threat to them. But why was Noel insisting on it? Who was he anyway? He was just a security guard and should follow the owner's orders. Noel hadn't behaved like this before. It was after he got rid of Victor for Robert that he started treating Robert as an equal. And until recently, Robert was fine with it. But not now. Finishing his fourth glass of whiskey, Robert heard a car pull into the mansion's courtyard. Noel was back. Robert sat in his armchair, crossed his legs, trying to show with all his demeanor that he was the master of life. He was in charge. Noel entered, looking grim. This man always had a gloomy and discontented expression. Robert had long been accustomed to it, but now the security guard seemed gloomier than usual. Robert, who knew him well, immediately realized that Noel hadn't succeeded in something. Nevertheless, he asked, "I hope you have good news. Did you finish what you couldn't do 14 years ago?" "No, it didn't work out. The boy didn't open the door for me. I tried to enter the apartment myself, but then the neighbor came out." "You can't be trusted with anything. Absolutely anything," Robert said. "You say the boy didn't open the door, which means he was in the apartment. Could he have seen you, recognized that you're my security guard? It won't be difficult for him to report to his police father. What are we going to say? Why did you come? That's not a problem. Why did I come? To take a look at the boy. Spencer claimed he's Victor's heir. I decided to see for myself. There's no criminal intent in my visit. What I couldn't do now, I'll finish later." "Robert, have you decided what we're going to do with Kristen?" "What do you mean we? You're just my security guard. It's none of your concern. She's my wife. I'll figure out this issue with her myself." "What are you talking about?" Noel said. "This issue concerns not only you. Kristen overheard you in the office saying that I killed Victor and his wife. Me. So let me also participate in deciding her fate." Robert threw the glass of whiskey onto the table. He stood up angrily, staring at Noel. Noel had never spoken to him in such a tone before. Noel didn't look away. His gaze was intense. Robert, too, was unhappy with Noel's behavior. Yes, he was the boss and all that, but their relationship had long exceeded the boundaries of employer-guard. They were bound by something bigger. Noel stood close to Robert, slightly leaning over him. The men stared each other in the eyes intensely. It felt like a standoff, and Robert was the first to give in. "What do you want, Noel?" he asked, throwing his hands up. "Do you want to get rid of my wife? You know how much I love her. Let's wait a while. Maybe I can convince her. She can pretend. And when we relax, she'll run to the police." "Robert, I don't recognize you anymore. This woman has softened you. I'm not going to prison because of her. Right now, there's nothing against us. Nothing can be proven until she opens her mouth." Robert moved away from Noel, picked up the fallen glass, poured whiskey into it, and took a big gulp. "I wouldn't say that. Spencer didn't just go to Force Town for no reason. I was informed that he tracked down a guard, Remember the one who claimed Eleanor didn't kill but saved the child, even if he did? Noel said harshly. Let's say this major proves that the maid didn't kill. How will he connect us to it? He can speculate about many things, but he has no evidence. Again, that's until your wife opens her mouth. You can't keep her in the basement forever. What do you want, Noel? Robert almost cried. What do you want to do with her? I've already told you. An accident like falling down the stairs would be the perfect scenario. And it's better not to delay. Is there anyone from the staff in the house? You know yourself, Noel. After 6, almost everyone leaves. Only Parker remains, who monitors the perimeter cameras. He's been asking me for a day off for a while. So, after we put Kristen in the basement, I let him go. Robert spoke all this, not believing himself that he was discussing with Noel a plan to eliminate Kristen. It was as if something inside him died with this decision. But Noel wouldn't back down, and ultimately, the guard was right. However much Robert tried to console himself, life with Kristen was no longer possible, and she wouldn't stay silent either. Deep down, Robert knew this from the very beginning. Meanwhile, Noel laid out his long-prepared plan. So, Robert, you take the car and head to the nearest restaurant. Your task is to stay visible all the time. If anything happens, Kristen fell ill and stayed home. I'll tidy up her bed. Put some medicine on the nightstand. The woman was feeling unwell, lying down. She wanted to go downstairs for some water, felt dizzy, and that's it. I'll wait for a while after you leave. I'll do everything necessary, and then rush to the restaurant. Leave the keys in the car. We'll say I drove you here and waited in the car all the time. Good plan, yes. It's fine. Robert nodded like a robot. He wanted to disconnect from what was happening. Let whatever must happen, happen. There are other women like Kristen. The man tried to convince himself of that. Spencer was in a hurry. He remembered Kristen and analyzed her last call in his mind. She reported that Robert and the guard were planning an attack on Tyler. And then the call was cut off. What could that mean? So, they caught her making that call and took her phone. And what could they do to her? Kristen knows too much. Spencer had seen how lovingly Robert looked at his wife in the restaurant. But such people stop at nothing, and no love can stop them. Action needed to be taken very quickly. Before he entered Chicago, Spencer already knew Robert's address after making a couple of calls. He decided to head straight there. All that was left was to pray to God that it wasn't too late, and that Kristen was still alive. She was such a brave woman, and it was thanks to her that Tyler was safe now. In Robert's house, there was a small room with several monitors where all signals from cameras placed around the yard were received. Usually, one of the 2 young men who worked for the head of Pharma Tech sat in this room. Currently, on one of the monitors, a man could be clearly seen climbing over the high fence. However, there was no one to see it. The room was empty. Hanging on the fence, the man jumped down. Then, moving cautiously, he started making his way to the house. Spencer, it was him, wanted to go unnoticed. He was risking his job greatly by what he was doing now. But at the moment, he didn't care much. He just wanted to see Kristen again. Kristen was cold in the basement. She took out a blanket from the laundry basket and wrapped herself in it. But she was still shivering. Maybe she was shaking not from the cold, but from fear for herself and for the boy she had never seen, Tyler. The heavy wooden door of the basement swung open, and Noel stepped through the threshold. Kristen flinched. Why did he come to her? How could Robert allow this? This visit could only mean one thing. Robert made a decision not in her favor. Noel didn't speak to the woman. She was just an expendable asset to him. He silently approached, pulled the blanket off Kristen's shoulders, neatly folded it into the laundry basket. There shouldn't be any signs of disorder in the house, nor signs of struggle. Therefore, grabbing Kristen's hand, he tried not to squeeze her fragile wrist too hard to avoid leaving bruises. Kristen started trembling again. She tried to talk to Noel. What are you doing, Noel? Please, Don't. I'll keep quiet. I won't tell anyone. Please, Noel. The man didn't listen or pay attention to Kristen. He silently do his business. Spencer, no longer hiding, approached the front door. It was open. Moreover, even after entering the house, Spencer remained unnoticed. And then he heard a scream. Kristen was screaming, running through the hall. Spencer turned the corner and froze in place. Up the stairs to the second floor, some man was dragging Kristen. There was no doubt about his intentions. Spencer involuntarily exhaled. I made it. However, it was too early to rejoice. Spencer was only glad that he had his service weapon with him. Heading to Fosstown, Spencer always took a gun with him, as he did on any job. Stop! Noel heard a shout from behind. He turned around. The first thing he saw was the barrel of a gun aimed at him. Noel knew the major holding the gun. He had been under surveillance by him a couple of days ago. For Spencer, however, the man holding Kristen was unfamiliar. But from the scar on the man's chin, Noel realized that it was the same man who had come to Tyler. This was Robert's guard, doing all the dirty work for him. That meant this man was dangerous, very dangerous. Noel immediately confirmed Spencer's assumption by shielding himself with Kristen. His huge palms rested on Kristen's neck. I'll snap her neck. Hear me, Major. If you try to shoot, I'll do it. Step aside and let us leave the house. Spencer didn't know what to do. Kristen was so pale that she seemed to be on the verge of losing consciousness. And Noel's hands on her neck were just enormous. Spencer hesitated for a few seconds and then suddenly saw a glimmer in Kristen's eyes. She was signaling him with her eyes. Spencer tensed, preparing to shoot. Kristen arched her back and bit Noel's arm as hard as she could. It was a complete surprise for the guard holding her. He roared in pain and momentarily loosened his grip on the woman's neck. It was enough for Kristen to fall down the stairs and for Spencer to fire a shot. Kristen heard Noel collapse behind her, but she didn't want to look at him. She ran down the stairs and fell into Spencer's arms. Spencer, he wanted to kill me. How's your son? Is he okay? He's fine. You're amazing, Kristen. Thanks to you, everything's fine. Spencer stroked the woman's head and timidly hugged her shoulders. Kristen, you need to pull yourself together. I'll call now, and there will be many people here. They'll interrogate you. Tell them the whole truth. I understand your husband isn't at home. He needs to be arrested as soon as possible. And for us to be able to do that, you must tell everything as it is. Of course, Spencer, I'm ready. I wasn't going to keep silent. The 55-year-old woman kissed her sleeping sixth-grade son on the forehead, glanced around the tiny, sparsely furnished room, and quietly slipped out, closing the door behind her. She grabbed the old laptop from the room, their only luxury, in the kitchen. The woman turned on the laptop, opened the browser, and entered, for what was probably the 1,000th time, the same search queries. Pharma Tech, Robert Coleman. After that, Eleanor leaned back on the rickety chair, held the teacup in her hands, and began to wait. What news would the internet bring her? However, she already knew what information she would find. Pharma Tech was thriving. Everything was great for Robert. There were even photos online with his new beautiful wife. And somewhere in the background, she always saw the scarred face that made Eleanor shudder. That Christmas Eve, 14 years ago, was forever imprinted in the woman's memory. How she first fled with the child, then alone. How she ended up as the main suspect in the murder. How she lost her husband, but she didn't regret saving Tyler. Although, after that night, her own life took a turn for the worse. Eleanor had been hiding for 14 years, living on forged documents. The only real thing in them was her name. After fleeing, she spent a couple of months homeless, spending nights in basements, always afraid they would come after her. And then, very unexpectedly, she realized she was pregnant. It shook the woman deeply. It was as if a sign from above. At that time, she was 40. Eleanor had been married for 10 years, but she and her husband had no children. It didn't work out, as if God didn't allow it. And then suddenly, it was as if the Lord rewarded Eleanor for what she had done, for saving Tyler. And now the main thing was to ensure a normal life for her future child. A completely normal life was out of reach. Eleanor lived on forged documents, so she was constantly afraid and moved around the country. Her son couldn't get used to one school before they moved again. Eleanor worked all kinds of jobs during this time. She worked as a mail carrier, a janitor in a shopping center, and now as a dishwasher in a restaurant. She deliberately chose only such vacancies where they wouldn't scrutinize her documents too strictly, and where they wouldn't pay too much attention to her face either. Eleanor knew she was still wanted by the authorities. The son was growing up and starting to ask questions. Darren didn't like how they lived. He didn't like the constant moving. Eleanor realized that her boy was getting too big. Soon, her silly excuses wouldn't work on him anymore. She would have to explain to her son why they were always on the move. But how would she explain it? Just come out and say, "Your mom is wanted for murder." Eleanor took a sip of tea from her cup, looked at the laptop screen, and tensed up. Something new had popped up. She clicked with the mouse, read the text, blinked, read it again. It was unbelievable. Robert was arrested, and his bodyguard died during the arrest. Robert is charged with ordering the murder of Victor Rust and his wife and attempting to kill his current wife. The son of the current head of Pharma Tech has been found and is inheriting the rights. All charges against the murdered family's housekeeper have been dropped. Eleanor clutched her heart. It felt like it would break into pieces. It would be so foolish to die of joy now. Still, she couldn't believe it. She touched her chest. "Calm down, heart. You can't be this happy. Now only good things lie ahead. I can step out of the shadows, start living my real life, without hiding." Suddenly, she slammed shut the laptop and jumped up. She ran into the room to her sleeping son. Darren. She shook the boy. "Wake up. We're going to Chicago." "Mom." Again. The sleepy teenager rubbed his eyes. "Darren, you don't understand. Everything will be fine for us now." Darren really didn't understand anything. He had never seen his mom like this. She was laughing and crying at the same time, and hugging him like crazy. The white SUV was slowly driving through Chicago. Spencer was at the wheel, steering with one hand. His other hand was occupied, holding Kristen's palm as she sat in the passenger seat. Tyler, sitting in the back, teased, "Dad, you're a bad cop, breaking traffic rules. You shouldn't drive with one hand. Maybe at least here you won't hold hands." Tyler was just teasing his father. Although it might seem from the outside that he didn't like Kristen, that wasn't true. On the contrary, he really liked her. He also liked how his strict father softened up around her. Kristen and Spencer understood that Tyler was just teasing, and they just smiled, holding each other's hands tighter. "Maybe we won't go to Pharma Tech today. The guys invited me to play football." "Tyler." Spencer gave him a stern look in the rearview mirror. "You need to be more serious. Pharma Tech is your father's legacy, and you need to start getting involved in the business. Of course, we found a good manager, and Kristen oversees everything. But that's not enough. Sooner or later, you'll have to take over the company." "I'm not against it, Dad. I understand everything. But today, don't whine," Spencer said. "Tyler, what about the shadow schemes in the company?" Kristen joined the conversation. "If we break all those deals now, the company will suffer losses." "I understand." Tyler nodded. "And so what?" "Robert confessed during interrogation why he ordered my family. Because my real father didn't want to conduct business dishonestly. I'll be just like him. And like Dad. Like both of my dads." "Never doubted it." Spencer smiled. The SUV pulled up to the main office of Pharma Tech. Spencer parked, and the three of them got out of the car. Tyler walked towards the main entrance, but something bothered him. It felt like someone's gaze was drilling a hole in his back. He turned around and saw a modestly dressed woman behind the iron bars of the fence. She stood there, gripping the wrought iron posts with her hands, staring intently at Tyler, her gaze unwavering. This woman didn't evoke negativity in Tyler. Rather the opposite. There was something about her. "Dad, look there. This woman. Why is she staring at me like that? Her face, it feels familiar," Tyler said. Spencer looked in the direction his son pointed and smiled. He knew who she was. He had seen photos on wanted posters. He had been waiting for her to show up. "Yes, son. You know this woman. You don't remember, of course, but you know her. Go. Bow to her. You owe her your life," Spencer said. Eleanor stood and watched as the young man approached her, so reminiscent of Victor. Tears welled up in her eyes. It was as if she could feel the warmth of the little body wrapped in a coat again. Tyler approached, saw these tears, and without a word, hugged the woman. He just felt like he had to do it. Eleanor burst into tears. There, no need to cry," Spencer said, catching up with his son. "Eleanor, we've been waiting for you, and now everything will be fine for you. You won't have to hide anymore." Eleanor pulled away from Tyler, wiped her tears, and looked at the handsome tall man in the police uniform. Then back at Tyler. She didn't know what to say. "I want to introduce you to my son," the woman finally said. "He's in 6th grade. He never understood why we kept moving from city to city. I'll explain everything to him," Tyler exclaimed. "Let him know that his mom is a hero and that she saved my life." "That's true," Spencer nodded. "Not everyone in your position, Eleanor, would have done the same. It wasn't easy for you after that, but now we'll restore justice. Right, Tyler?" "Absolutely," the boy exclaimed. "Introduce me to your son. I want him to go to school with me. I'll introduce him to everyone as my little brother. Our family is growing." Kristen laughed. "I guess we won't be dealing with company matters today." "It seems not," Spencer grinned. "We have more important things to do. Eleanor, where are you staying?" "Nowhere yet. We just arrived." "That's okay. Come to our place. Let's get to know each other better, and then we'll decide where you'll live. After all, Tyler is rich now, right?"